Chapter 11:14. Hueco Mundo was always so cold and bleak, a deathly silence. The sandstorm was the truest portrayal of Hueco Mundo. The boundless void distorted and a figure stepped out from it. It was a young man with delicate features and handsome features. His deep eyes were filled with wisdom and his black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were indifferent from the beginning to the end. However, the gentle smile at the corner of his mouth made him seem very friendly. His temperament was extremely contradictory, both good and evil. It was as if he could call you brother in 1 second and go through a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, but in the next second, he could turn hostile and stab you in the back. It was always hard to tell what he was thinking. "Young master." Haribel, who had been notified in advance, called out. Her voice was very clear and pleasant. She was usually as cold as ice, but when she saw Dustless, she immediately put on a smiling face. "Yo, long time no see." Dustless withdrew his indifference, and a gentle smile bloomed on his face. He had always treated those who sincerely supported him with sincerity. Voids and Shinigami were no different in his eyes. On the contrary, Dustless preferred Voids because they were easy to tame. Compared to the Shinigami of Soul Society, Dustless believed that great Voids were much easier to communicate with. If he showed more strength than the other party, most Voids would submit. Ever since Dustless wanted to capture Eastern Sage to Soul Society, and because of Dustless's calculations, Haribel became the uncrowned king of Hueco Mundo. And because of Dustless's calculations, Sosuke Aizen trusted Haribel without a doubt, and gradually replaced Eastern Sage, who used to be his right-hand man. Sosuke Aizen was relieved to leave Hueco Mundo to Haribel. "How have you been recently?" After landing, Dustless was not in a hurry to ask about Hueco Mundo. Instead, he was very concerned about Haribel. A qualified leader should first know how to win the trust of his subordinates, and not use them without limits. A small stream flows a long stream. "I'm fine." Haribel nodded and replied calmly. Hearing this, Dustless smiled. Even though Haribel hid it very well, Dustless could still clearly see the gratitude in her trembling voice. Sosuke Aizen had never shown such concern before. "How's the thing I told you to prepare?" Changing the topic, Dustless asked. "Now that you've become the king of Hueco Mundo, you should know the people I'm talking about like the back of your hand." Dustless was talking about the great voids at the level of Vastolord, Stark, Ulquiorra, Haribel herself, and a female Vastolord. Her name was Niru. Ulquiorra and Stark are both loyal to Sosuke Aizen. I'll find an opportunity to kill them both. As for Nero, the image of a little lowly appeared in his mind, Dustless said softly. "If the method is used properly, she can be pulled into our camp." In fact, Dustless didn't intend to recruit subordinates. He knew that he could defeat Shinigami by himself, but after seeing Quincy's numbers, Dustless's heart was destroyed. Not to mention anything else, Dustless didn't expect them to fight. At least, he needed a few subordinates to gather information for him. This was the most basic thing, so he didn't want to be a headless fly that had to do everything by himself. He even had to gather information by himself. Her. A green-haired Great Void's figure appeared in Haribel's mind, she pondered. Her strength is indeed good, but she hasn't betrayed Sosuke Aizen, that hateful man. Approaching her rashly might backfire. Unlike other Great Voids, Nero was very kind. Sosuke Aizen once used a trick to save her, so she was almost loyal to Sosuke Aizen, comparable to a stubborn person like Ulquiorra. Haribel. Take a long-term view. If there are no conditions, we can create them. If Sosuke Aizen can save Nero, we can also make her betray us. Dustless smiled confidently. He was a transmigrator and could predict the future. His advantage was self-evident. If he couldn't even defeat Sosuke Aizen, he might as well find a deserted place and kill himself. Haribel's eyes were shining, she said. "I understand, master. I'll go and sneak attack her. Then you come out and save her." Sosuke Aizen used this old-fashioned method to trick Nero. This old-fashioned method sometimes works, but sometimes it's self-defeating and not suitable. And Nero isn't a 3-year-old child. She'll definitely be exposed. Dustless knew that Nero hadn't been attacked by Nutla yet. Her memory and body hadn't deteriorated. She was very smart now. That's right. Dustless's eyes lit up. After Haribel's reminder, he suddenly thought of a feasible plan to drag Nero into the water. That idiot called Nutla remembered that Nero was very dissatisfied. He can use it. Dustless sneered and thought of a plan in an instant. Yes, he has always looked down on female voids. He's as arrogant as Grimjow, who was killed by Master. When mentioning Nutla, Harabel's face was cold. A mere Ajuchas wasn't worth mentioning to her, but even so, Nutla didn't know what was good for him and deliberately provoked her. Not only did he provoke Nero, but Harabel also provoked him. She wasn't afraid of Nutla. Vasto Lord could easily crush Ajuchas. She was too lazy to deal with Nutla because she didn't want to cause trouble. But some people thought that this was a disguised fear, so they took advantage of it. That's just right. After using him, I'll take the opportunity to kill Nutla and purify the world. In the sandstorm, Dustless and Harabel's figures drifted and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 11:15. Las Noches Palace was dark and depressing. After Helibel became the new uncrowned king, all the big and small affairs were completely handled by her. Humph, a female void is so arrogant. One day I will kill you too. Nutla's eyes were full of greed, circling around Helibel and Nero. He was an Ajuchas, and he was fascinated by the legendary Vasto Lord. All voids yearned to reach that level, and the arrogant Nutla was no exception. If I devour two Vasto Lord, I will definitely break through the bottleneck and advance to Vasto Lord. His eyes were full of greed, and Nutla was daydreaming. In the vast expanse, he seemed to have seen the day he became Vasto Lord. In a secret room in Las Noches Palace. What did you say? How could it be? How could Aizen abandon her? That guy is Vasto Lord. Nutla asked with wide eyes, looking at Helibel in disbelief. His face was full of doubt, and his first thought was that Helibel deliberately lied to him. Nero is too kind, not suitable for battle. Therefore, Lord Aizen decided to abandon her, and let you secretly kill her and then devour her. Helibel repeated, her tone indifferent. These words were naturally ordered by Dustless to say by Helibel. It was very cost-effective to get rid of Nutla, an eyesore cockroach, and at the same time to pull Nero to their side. By the time Aizen realized it, his 10 blades had already been shattered into pieces, turning into nothing more than a bubble. Are you not willing? After you devour Nero, Lord Aizen will do everything to help you enter Vasto Lord. After all, you have the greatest potential among all the Ajuchas. Helibel said softly, her voice full of endless magic, bewitching Nutla. He seemed to be bewitched, his throat choked, and his body trembled slightly. Willing, of course I am willing. Nutla said quickly, slandering in his heart. Do you think I am stupid, this kind of beautiful thing? Only an idiot would not be willing. But, as if thinking of something, Nutla said unwillingly, but Nero is a real Vasto Lord. If she really fought seriously, I would definitely not be her opponent. Although very unhappy, Nutla had to admit that he was not Nero's opponent. The gap between the two was too big. That is your own business, the road has been pointed out. Whether you can do it or not depends on your ability. Helibel said indifferently. Hearing this, Nutla's expression, and began to think about how to plot against Nero. He didn't doubt Harabel's words because Nero was that kind of person. She wasn't suited for battle and was too kind. She was the complete opposite of Hollow's nature. Therefore, Net Era wouldn't be surprised if Sosuke Aizen kicked her out of the battle. The key was the method. Young master, I've already explained everything according to your method. As for Nutla's final move, I don't know. Inside Las Noches Palace, Dustless leisurely leaned on a chair, very comfortable, his face intoxicated. Don't worry, he will definitely attack Nero. I know that kind of arrogant person too well. Dustless waved his hand, indicating that Helibel did not need to worry. Nutla's mantis form was extremely arrogant, even more so than Grimjow, who was killed by Dustless before. He liked to call everyone trash. He is not reconciled when facing Nero, he always has disdain in his heart, but he can't admit that he is not Nero's opponent, so he will use other despicable means. This is the essence of Nutla. Helibel nodded involuntarily. It was not so much the essence of Nutla, but the essence of Nutla. An evil soul like Nutla was originally born from negative emotions. Boom boom boom. A violent roar came out of nowhere, causing the entire virtual night palace to be on the verge of collapse as it swayed back and forth with creaking sounds. This spiritual pressure is Nutla's, the other. Seems to be Nutla's spiritual pressure. Hellable guessed, obviously a little sluggish. How long has it been? And Nutla can't wait to find trouble with Nero. No need to be surprised, this is very normal, everything is expected. Dustless smiled indifferently. This was the ability of a transmigrator to foresee the future, an innate advantage. Boom boom boom. Another violent wave of spiritual pressure crushed the surrounding greater voids. Nero was still fine as she had deliberately suppressed her spiritual pressure. However, Nutla's abnormal spiritual pressure swept across like a hurricane, and some of the weaker greater voids were directly crushed. Dustless and Hellable didn't feel anything. It was like a gentle breeze. They didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, they felt very cool. The only uncomfortable thing was that this cool breeze also carried an endless smell of blood. It made people uncontrollably nauseous. This is a good opportunity. Find a chance to get rid of Nutla, then I will save Nero. Dustless, who was watching in the dark, sneered. He did not think that he was despicable, instead. He felt that he was unusually kind. Hellable loyally followed Aizen Sosuke, who expected that in the end, she was instantly killed by Aizen Sosuke. Nero was probably not much stronger, so in Dustless's eyes, this was not a scheme, but a disguised redemption. Chapter 11:16. On the other side, Nero and Nutla were engaged in a fierce battle. The spiritual pressure of both sides swept across the entire Las Noches palace, causing cracks to appear in many places. However, the grand voids of Las Noches palace turned a deaf ear to this. This kind of thing was not strange. Nutla often challenged Nero, and most of the time, the results were the same. Nutla was completely defeated. After all, Nero was a vasto lord. However, the situation this time was somewhat unusual. Nero's spiritual pressure was ferocious, more than any previous time. She was serious. You dare to attack my subordinate? You bastard. You are digging your own grave. Everyone had their own bottom line, and Nero was no exception. Looking carefully, there were two grand voids leaning against the surrounding walls. There were obvious bloodstains on their bodies, and they were obviously seriously injured. Oh! Nutla went too far this time. He actually injured Nero's subordinate. This is interesting. Dustless rubbed his chin and laughed strangely. If Nero was playing with Nutla before, then this spiritual pressure that was close to going berserk showed that she was serious. Yes, Nilu values her subordinates very much. Nutla really poked a hornet's nest this time. Amir Ajuchas actually dared to anger Vasto Lord. I have a new understanding of his stupidity. This was simply a retard. A huge aura swept across the entire Las Noches palace. A thick energy beam spread out from Nero's body, and a destructive wave erupted. The ground was scorched, and the sky was blocked. At this moment, Nero was like a god of destruction. Damn, is this Vasto Lord's strength? Hateful. This damned woman did not use her full strength to deal with me before. Under this horrifying spiritual pressure, Nutla felt that he was very small and could not withstand a single blow. He was as fragile as a bug. His arrogant heart was inevitably insulted. Sneak attacking me and seriously injuring my subordinate. Even if this goes to Lord Aizen, I will not let you off easily. Nero's murderous intent was awe-inspiring. Her beautiful eyes were cold, and even the surging space around her could freeze. Go to Lord Aizen? What an idiot. Neutra laughed unscrupulously and said with disdain, "Oh right, I forgot to tell you. The person who ordered me to kill you is Sosuke Aizen." Well said. Dustless, who heard this from afar, was overjoyed and secretly gave Nutla a thumbs up. Impossible. Niru was stunned for a moment before she sneered. You want to trick me into betraying Aizen? Are you kidding me? Do you think I'll fall for it? Too naive. You're the idiot. Sosuke Aizen is only using us as pawns. He wants us to be his pawns. Do you think your personality is suitable? You are too merciful, so you must be removed. Neutra laughed wildly. His laughter was full of sarcasm. Seeing that Nero was silent, he continued to attack her bluntly. Look at our fight. We have already destroyed Las Noches, and no one has stopped us. This shows that you have been abandoned. When these words fell into Neru's ears, it was even more serious than being cut several times in a row. She clenched her fists tightly. Humph. Aizen said that as long as I kill you, I can devour you, and he will help me advance to Vasto Lord. At the end of his speech, Nutra almost danced with joy. The person who actually said these words was Hellebel, but Nutra, who discriminated against women, didn't even say Hellebel's name. Anyway, Hellebel was just a messenger. At the same time, a mysterious shadow swept into the air, and the sharp Zanpakuto slashed directly at Niru. Pucci! Caught off guard, Niru was immediately seriously injured, and the bone mask on her forehead was crushed by the ferocious blade. Her face turned pale, and she suddenly spat out a big mouthful of blood. But the most surprising thing was that Niru's Ryatsu fluctuations gradually decreased, like a deflated ball, and the majestic Ryatsu in her body dissipated in an instant. No wonder he is so confident. He actually conspired with others. Hellebel's face changed, and she looked at Niru with a bit of self-blame in her eyes. As a female Greater Void, and Vasto Lord, the two of them had a good personal relationship. Enough. You go and stop the Greater Void reinforcements. Leave these two to me. Looking at the figure who attacked Niru, Dustless stepped out and disappeared like a hurricane. The pink Greater Void, called Arsaporo, was also one of the future 10 Blades. His strength was good, especially 200 years ago. He was said to be Vasto Lord. Later, for some reason, his soul was divided into two and he was demoted to the current Ajuchas. I'm coming. Seeing this, Nutra was overjoyed, and he quickly rushed toward Niru. At this moment, her Ryatsu dissipated, and she was at her most vulnerable. Pucci! A golden light flashed, and Nutra's face turned pale, and he was shocked to find that his arms were cut off by the light. The light condensed, and Dustless's figure appeared. Looking at Niru, who was on the verge of collapse, Dustless stepped forward. Dustless breathed a sigh of relief and gave Niru a comforting look. Phew, fortunately, she's fine. Just some superficial wounds, no big deal. Who are you? The pink-haired Arsaporo asked. Looks like a Grim Reaper. But you dare to break into Las Noches Palace alone. Even if you are a Grim Reaper, you will die. Hearing this, Dustless stared coldly at Nutra. This meddlesome Ajuchas was beyond his expectations, and Niru was injured. It's you two who should die. Chapter 11:17. His deep eyes spun, and a murderous glint flashed. Nutla and Salapalo's hearts skipped a beat. They knew that things were not going well. Those ferocious red eyes seemed to want to annihilate their souls. They were in extreme pain as if they were being burned by the invisible fire of the Red Lotus. They were almost melting. Nutla and Salapalo saw this and took a step back. Even though Dustless did not have any Ryatsu fluctuations, his glance was enough to make them tremble in fear. The two of them could not help but break out in cold sweat. Bastard! After taking a step back, Nutla, who realized what had happened, was shocked and angry. If there were not so many people around, he would have slapped himself. He was so scared by a person's gaze that he kept retreating, unable to resist. Just thinking about it made Nutla's whole body explode. What kind of humiliation was this? The sword of the Grim Reaper can't hurt me. Among the 10 blades, my steel skin is the hardest. Nutla laughed arrogantly. And I have this ability. The arms that were cut off by Dustless suddenly emitted a strange Ryatsu fluctuation. Immediately, the severed arms quickly regenerated. So, what are you trying to say? Dustless was not moved. He asked indifferently, don't talk about super regeneration and steel skin, these two shallow abilities. Even if you have the ability to resurrect the dead, you are still doomed to die. You said my ability is shallow? Nutla was stunned. He immediately laughed out of anger and said, is that so? Then I will let you understand what it means to defy the natural order. The word shocking is a true description of me. After saying that, Nutla waved his horrifying weapon and stabbed. His speed was so fast that only a black afterimage could be seen. Even because the sand was too soft, the place where he passed by set off a storm. You are short-sighted. Do you really think that Arankars are invincible? Don't be ridiculous. Don't say that you are just an Achuka's Arankar. Even if you are a Vasto Lord, in fact, you are just Azo. Dustless sneered. The so-called Vasto Lord was actually very fragile. At least in Dustless's eyes, it could be destroyed with a flick of his finger. For some captain-class Shinigami, Vasto Lord was just as vulnerable. For example, Aizen Sosuke could suppress a Juches with Ryatsu alone. He could kill Vasto Lord with one strike. Dustless was even less of a problem. At this moment, the sky suddenly darkened. Dustless suddenly looked up and saw a figure wielding a large saber descending from the sky. The force of his falling body was like a mountain that weighed hundreds of tons. Go away. This guy is very strong. Seeing Dustless looking at the sky like he was possessed, the kind-hearted Nero quickly reminded him. However, if she knew that the person who had planned all of this was Dustless, her heart would probably be so depressed that she would vomit blood. Leave. Why should I leave? Hueco Mundo doesn't belong to their family. Glancing at Nero indifferently, Dustless remained calm. The chakra in his body surged, and a giant Tengu was formed in the blink of an eye. Kansusanu. Following Wu Chen's command, the golden light turned from virtual to real. The thick arm clenched tightly, and a super-large fist blasted out. What the hell is this? Nutla roared with a sharp tone. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets as he looked at the oncoming golden Daquan, which was almost the size of a small mountain. Feeling the penetrating sharpness of the fist, he quickly blocked his weapon in front of his chest. Bang! Under the control of his mind, the thick fist blasted into Nutla without any accident. The powerful force could destroy heaven and earth, and Nutla disappeared in an instant. Hundreds of meters away, Nutla was lying on the ground in a sorry state. His bones were shattered, and only his internal organs and head were intact. The rest of his body had been crushed. What kind of monster is that? Lifting his head with difficulty, he saw the terrifying Tengu armor, sensed the heart-palpitating power, and the injuries all over his body. Nutla's self-esteem collapsed in an instant. I must tear you apart alive, I must. Nutla gnashed his teeth and said hatefully, revealing a hysterical madness in his words. Listening to this determined tone, it seemed that he wanted to perish together with Dustless. However, he didn't have the chance. Dustless turned into a rainbow light, illuminating a large area of Las Noches Palace. The dazzling light made people not dare to look at him directly. What does this guy want to do? Nutla was stunned. Looking at Dustless, who had turned into a flash of light, a hint of fear instinctively flashed in his eyes. He quickly used all the strength in his body to activate super regeneration. He instinctively felt that something was wrong. Are you still going to struggle? But it doesn't matter. You're lucky that your internal organs weren't destroyed just now. This time, I'll crush your entire body. With a sinister smile, the light gathered in Dustless's hands swarmed out. The moment it appeared, it almost covered the entire sky. Yasakani no Magatama. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Thousands of sharp piercing sounds made people shudder. Nutla stared blankly at the falling light bullets. His face was ashen, and the idea of super regeneration was put down. Bang bang bang. Not only Nutla's body, but the earth was also affected by the most ruthless and cruel radiance. Countless holes were dug out, and almost half of Las Noches Palace was filled with holes. As for Nutla, his body was crushed into powder, and the stench of a foreign species was still lingering. Life and death were completely destroyed. Not to mention continuing to fight with Dustless, Nutla didn't even leave behind a corpse. Chapter 11:18. Nilu's eyes widened when she saw this scene. Her pupils dilated several times. She was horrified and shocked. She stared at Dustless in surprise as if she was looking at a prehistoric monster. Her eyes refused to move at all. He killed Nutla in just 2 moves. Oh my god, am I dreaming? Nero murmured to herself. She knew that she could easily defeat Nutla, but she was far from being able to defeat someone as simple as Dustless. It was completely overwhelming strength. No, it was completely using the strength of a super dimension to instantly kill Nutla. The two sides were completely incomparable. Strange, when did such a person appear in Hueco Mundo? Nero's eyes glowed, and her face showed deep curiosity. Sal Apollo's face was full of disgust. In terms of strength, Nutla was still above him. Although he used to be Vasto Lord, that was almost 200 years ago. Right now, he was just a weak Ajuches. Nutla was the best example. He did not even have the time to release his blade before he was killed by Dustless. Only 2 moves. No, only 1 move. In Salapalo's view, the last move, Yasakani no Magatama, was completely unnecessary. It was just a casual move, and he did not even make a move, but Nutla was instantly crippled. How do you feel? After approaching Nero and seeing that she was safe and sound, Dustless smiled and said, "This is just a small injury. There is no need to worry about it." Nero nodded and looked at Dustless gratefully. She solemnly thanked him and said, "If it wasn't for you, I would have been killed by those 2 despicable guys." And Nero's eyes rolled around Dustless. She said in surprise, "It is really rare to see a greater void like you." Void? Hearing this, Dustless shook his head helplessly in his heart, thinking that Nero was really kind and naive. Idiot. He's not a void. He's a Grim Reaper through and through. Therill said cautiously. He unsheathed his Zanpakuto and aimed it at Dustless. "Let's put our personal grudges aside and work together to kill this Shinigami. Since you are loyal to Aizen, you should know that his enemy is the Shinigami." It would have been better if Salapalo had not said anything. Now that Salapalo had mentioned it, Nero was instantly enraged. The majestic spiritual pressure that had disappeared earlier was now completely restored, and it pressed down on Salapalo with an overwhelming force. The waves were endless like the sea, wave after wave, and they were endless. Ka. Unable to withstand the destructive and suffocating spiritual pressure, visible cracks began to appear on the steel skin on Salapalo's body. "Aizen? I want to kill him." Nero's words were shocking. She turned her head to look at her subordinates who were in a terrible state, and her dormant killing intent erupted. People have reverse scales, those who touch them will die. Now that Sosuke Aizen indiscriminately sent people to kill her, Nero naturally wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. TSK. It seems that my efforts were not in vain. I'll have to provide free labor in the future. Dustless said happily. Looking at Nero's hateful expression, he sighed that women were indeed creatures who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. Towards betrayers, they all harbored a deep-seated hatred. Of course, betrayal was actually nonsense. It was just that Dustless had plotted against Nutra once. Ka. The void instantly twisted into a whirlpool, and a pink light appeared. The extremely dense energy fluctuation attracted Dustless and Nero's attention. Is this Wang Su's flash? Nero's pretty face was extremely ugly, and crystal-clear beads of sweat fell from her forehead. Normally she would not be afraid, but now, she was powerless to deal with it. She involuntarily looked at Dustless. Thinking of his exaggerated strength, Nero calmed down a lot. Dustless was far stronger than her, so destroying Void Flash was naturally a piece of cake for him. It was just a small matter. Go to hell, you 2 eyesores, Therill Apollo said hatefully. He exerted his Ryatsu, and the pink Void Flash grew bigger and bigger. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The light that had reached the bottleneck gushed out, directly crushing Dustless and Nero. Its power was extremely powerful. Everything that was covered by the pink light was distorted, and even the passing wind and sand were forced to change their trajectory. Boom boom boom. The moment the energy sphere appeared, it turned into a thick beam of light. Dustless and Nero were not worth mentioning. They were so small that they could be easily killed with a flick of a finger. Scared out of your wits? Serves you right. This is the Wang Su's flash, that I used with all my strength, so its power is naturally extraordinary. It's normal for me to be afraid. Nutra smiled proudly, and his smile was very arrogant. You're mistaken. Dustless shook his head and denied it lightly. I didn't dodge not because I was scared out of my wits, but because there was no need to dodge at all. You want me to escape? You don't deserve it. Then, under Therill Apollo's shocked gaze, Dustless slowly raised his right arm and swept it up, hitting the incoming Void Flash head-on. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Void Flash that was powerful enough to destroy the sky was suddenly forced to change its trajectory and swept toward the sky. It was casually slapped away by Dustless. How is this possible? I must have forgotten to bring my eyes when I came out in a hurry, and my old eyes must be seeing things. Therill Apollo gasped and said in a daze. His tone became abnormally slow, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless. Especially when he saw that Dustless looked as if nothing had happened. He was even more certain of his thoughts. It was definitely an illusion. Chapter 11:19. Sal Apollo's face alternated between red and purple as he clenched his fists tightly. Whether it was an illusion or a dream, he had to admit that the dustless in front of him was a super god. Damn it, if I'm dreaming, it should be my dream. Why is he so strong in my dream? This isn't fair. Sal Apollo cursed in his heart. He felt powerless, and even though he tried to suppress the fear in his heart, his pale face betrayed him. This was the first time he had witnessed such a miraculous scene. Flash had sent Wang Su flying with a single hand. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, a deafening roar came from the sky, and a pink light covered the sky within a few kilometers, creating a large vacuum. TSK. If this void flash didn't explode, you would have thought that I did something to it. No, you would have thought that you overslept. Looking at the dumbfounded Sal Apollo, Dustless teased. While speaking, his words were full of sarcasm and disdain. Don't be so smug. Hearing this, Sal Apollo's face changed greatly. He had always thought of himself as superior, so how could he stand being mocked by Dustless? He was the most outstanding scientist in Hueco Mundo, and no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a disdainful tone. Even Sosuke Aizen spoke to him as if he was equal. He's very strong, and his body is very unusual. Be careful. Seeing Dustless's arrogance, Nero had to remind him. He's not as simple as he looks on the surface. I remember that about 200 years ago, he was a complete Vasto Lord. Later, for some reason, his soul suddenly split into two, and his strength fell to a Juchas. Humph. It's too late to say anything now. This blind death has angered this genius. He must pay the price to appease my anger. His life. Seeing that Nero had revealed his identity, Sal Apollo immediately clamored. His arrogance made it seem as if he would kill even the King of Heaven. I know. Dustless nodded. His next words made Nero and Sal Apollo vomit blood. He said, if it weren't for the lack of time, I would have dissected him and observed him. His soul can be divided into two. He's not simple. Dustless's tone was full of praise. To be able to split one's soul into two independent existences, he knew that he could not do it. He was somewhat impressed by Sal Apollo. You want to dissect me? Thar Apollo ignored all the bullshasterisk tea that Thar Apollo had spouted. Thar Apollo's handsome face was contorted as he roared, even if your head captain is here, he won't be able to save you, you bastard. Dustless's eyelids didn't even twitch when he felt the murderous aura coming at him. He directly ignored it. After glaring at Dustless fiercely, Sal Apollo suddenly took out a bottle of medicine. Dustless looked at it coldly and put it to his mouth. Stop him. Nero hurriedly urged Dustless. Sal Apollo is a mad scientist. His research will definitely change the outcome of this battle. Let him do what he wants. Dustless was indifferent. He said nonchalantly, I'm looking forward to seeing what effect the medicine will have on him. Nero didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was sure that after Sal Apollo swallowed the pill, his strength would at least increase by a few dimensions. Kakik. Ha ha ha. Sal Apollo roared with arrogant laughter. Then, a majestic spiritual pressure seemed to descend from the sky. It was so oppressive that it was difficult to breathe. Nero looked at Sal Apollo in horror. Suddenly, a terrifying thought flashed through her mind. Could it be that he has recovered all his strength from before? Looking at Sal Apollo, Nero's eyes flashed with astonishment. She could clearly feel that Sal Apollo's spiritual pressure was rapidly expanding, surpassing her at her peak. After all, Sal Apollo was Vasto Lord more than 200 years ago. I really don't know what you are afraid of. Just because he is Vasto Lord and has recovered his peak strength? Don't just limit your vision to Vasto Lord. Set your sights higher. There are many existences in this world that are stronger than Vasto Lord. For example, Sosuke Aizen, who you used to work for. Dustless explained calmly, turning a deaf ear to the immense spiritual pressure emanating from Sal Apollo. TSK. Don't tell me you are at the same level as Sosuke Aizen. Sal Apollo sneered. His eyes were full of arrogance. He closed his eyes and felt the spiritual pressure in his body. The trump card is usually used last. This is the price you have to pay for angering me. With a sneer, Sal Apollo took a step forward. He was as fast as lightning, and then he attacked. So fast. Nero was shocked. She could only see a faint afterimage. That exaggerated speed was beyond her detection ability. Whoosh! In an instant, the storm suddenly disappeared. It evaporated into thin air. She couldn't sense the spiritual pressure anymore. Where did he go? Nero's expression changed. She was on guard. She looked around and focused on searching for Sal Apollo's spiritual pressure. Behind your body, Dustless reminded her indifferently. Nero was stunned when she heard that. She turned around and saw Sal Apollo. Tsk. Death God, your reaction is quite fast. Sal Apollo, who was behind him, was surprised. Then he mocked arrogantly. But you still have to die. Bastard, when did it start? At that moment, a sharp pain suddenly spread throughout his body. Sal Apollo screamed. Chapter 11:20. Sal Apollo was shocked. Following his line of sight, one could clearly see that there was a golden sword stabbed into his abdomen. It was sharp, and the blade was emitting a dazzling golden light. Just looking at it would cause one to feel a stabbing pain in one's eyes. It was Dustless's personal artifact, the sword of heavenly clouds condensed from the glint fruit. When did this happen? I didn't see you do anything. Sal Apollo murmured as his monstrous body trembled. When? This sentence and this question are too funny. Dustless was very calm, and then he sneered in disdain. Indeed, as you said, I didn't do anything. You were the one who foolishly bumped into me. Haha. These words made Nero laugh. Looking at Sal Apollo's flushed face, she felt particularly happy. Stop bullshitting me. Sal Apollo's face turned red as he quibbled. His suffocating and despairing aura locked onto Dustless, and a beast-like ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. Or it could be said that he was an out-and-out beast. His whole body was covered with a thick bloody light. Enduring the pain all over his body, he forced himself to retreat. Every time he moved, his body would be in extreme pain. This damn thing is still hot? Sal Apollo was in unbearable pain. The scorching light of the sword of heavenly clouds was eroding his body. His internal organs were scorched, and his life force was reduced without limit. Bastard! Sal Apollo said fiercely, and his sharp roar sounded like he wanted to cut Dustless into pieces. Seeing that you are in so much pain, I will be a good person and help you. Looking at Sal Apollo, who was trying to break free from the sword of heavenly clouds but was in so much pain that his whole body was cold, Dustless chuckled, and his left eye suddenly turned white. The Tensigan descended. He gently raised his right hand and aimed at Sal Apollo's abdomen, and the chakra in his body began to dance. What? You want to hit me with such an ordinary fist? Do you think I am a human? No, this kind of ordinary fist can't even kill a human, let alone me, who was a top great void realm expert of Overlord 200 years ago. Looking at the ordinary fist, Sal Apollo expressed his disdain. The corner of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. Is that so? Then please give it a try. Dustless smiled strangely, and the Tensigan rotated rapidly, injecting all the eye power into his fist. Bang bang bang. An unparalleled repulsive force exploded, instantly blowing up half of Sal Apollo's body, leaving only the lower half. Oh, I wanted to play with you until the end, but it seems like I used too much strength, Dustless said with a face full of self-blame. You bastard! The roaring sound came from all directions, and the indignant voice lingered in Wu Chen's ears for a long time without dispersing. Still alive? That's great! Then, to Nero's astonishment, Sal Apollo, who only had half of his body left, began to release spiritual pressure and slowly formed a new body. How is this possible? How can he be reborn after his heart and head were destroyed? Nero was shocked. This was the first time she had seen such a situation. This is normal. This guy was Overlord 200 years ago, and it is normal for him to find ways to improve his strength or his physical ability. Don't forget that he is a scientist, and it is normal for him to invent some strange things. Dustless explained calmly. After all, he was Overlord, and it was normal for him to have some trump cards. Are you saying that my invention is a strange thing? Sal Apollo was furious. Voidness was composed of negative emotions, and except for a few individuals, many people were easily angered. How dare you say that such a great invention is strange? This is blasphemy. Sal Apollo roared with all his might. Then he declared proudly, my body, after decades of modification, has far surpassed the ability of super regeneration. Even if there is only a tiny bit of flesh or a single cell left, I can recover it. Sal Apollo was extremely arrogant and acted as if he was invincible. This made Nero frown. If what Sal Apollo said was true, then this guy had an immortal body and could be said to be invincible. Is that so? Thank you for your reminder. Dustless's spiritual pressure and chakra were all extinguished, and he thanked Sal Apollo seriously. Soon after, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a terrifying arc. Since you've told me your weakness, then I'll shatter your entire body. Truth-seeking jade. She waved her hand, and a black ball the size of a fist appeared. Bah! Are you trying to scare me? Childish. Seeing this, Sal Apollo smiled disdainfully. How could such a thing destroy him? He waved his hand and said, come at me if you dare. I promise I won't dodge. Then, please go to hell. Dustless said coldly. With a thought, the truth-seeking jade instantly enlarged by hundreds of times, turning into a large ball and swallowing Sal Apollo, who was unaware of it. He didn't even have time to scream before he disappeared. Now, except for Baligan, the king of Hueco Mundo, who was killed by Dustless last time, there was one less Vasto Lord. Won't Aizen Sosuke vomit blood from depression? Dustless thought to himself. Baligan had been killed, and so had Grimjow, and Nutla just now, and Sal Apollo were no exception. Hellable used to be Dustless's secret chess piece, and now Nero had been betrayed by him. Aizen Sosuke's 10 blades were in pieces. Chapter 11:21. The tip of the truth-seeking ball annihilated Sal Apollo. He was too careless to fight back, or rather, he didn't care at all. No one would have thought that such an ordinary-looking little sphere would be so terrifying. It was able to turn everything it came into contact with into ashes. The strangeness of it surpassed any of the techniques used in the world. Nero had never seen such a shocking trick before. She knew that Sosuke Aizen couldn't do it. She keenly felt that the ball didn't have Ryatsu. It was made of a special kind of energy. She had never seen it before. How is this possible? Nero's eyes widened, and her mouth opened so wide that a fist could fit in it. She was so shocked that her whole body was numb. The eyes that looked at Wu Chen were filled with obvious changes. They were filled with blind worship and respect. Hueco Mundo was a place where the strong were respected. If you were strong, you were the boss. If you weren't strong enough, you could only be bullied. Aizen was a Shinigami who could ride on top of all the grand voids because of his unprecedented strength. That's the best. It'll be easier to fool them. Seeing this, Dustless smiled and deliberately said, that bastard Sosuke Aizen is really hateful. He even betrayed his own subordinates. After saying this, Dustless looked at Nero's half-dead subordinates. I will kill him, Nilu said with hatred. She looked at the subordinate officials with red eyes. She looked like she was about to cry, and I felt pity for her. However, it's a pity that you can't kill him in this state. Sosuke Aizen's strength is second to none in Soul Society. Even the so-called Vasto Lord can't withstand a single move from him. Dustless deliberately said, obviously raising Sosuke Aizen's strength. He said, maybe you don't know, but in Soul Society, even the head captain doesn't dare to underestimate him. Hearing this, Nero's face fell, and the fire of hatred gradually extinguished. At the end of the void was Vasto Lord. It was obvious that this was the end for her. But the sudden words made Nero stunned. She was very nervous and excited. She looked at Wu Chen with eager eyes. He was her only life-saving straw. His watery appearance was quite cute. Isn't it a bit too much to fool her like this? Dustless felt strange. Nero was sincerely wiping her mouth, but then he remembered Sosuke Aizen's actions and shook his head resolutely. This was not a trick. This was his mother's redemption. Vasto Lord is the fixed point of nothingness, but it is not the end point of Eren core shattering. Hogyoku can only remove part of the mask on your body, so Eren core shattering actually has the possibility of improvement. Wu Chen explained with a chuckle. His tone was extremely certain. At this moment, a golden rainbow rushed over. 1,000 meters, 100 meters, 10 meters. Its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it was infinitely close to Nirvana and dustless. "It's you." Her pupils constricted, and after seeing who it was, she said warily, "Hellable? Are you here to kill me as well?" "Of course not." Before Hellable could speak, Dustless interrupted. "In fact, she's one of my people. Her purpose is to spy on Sosuke Aizen." Her cold and calm tone made it seem as if she was narrating a trivial matter. "How did you do it?" Hearing this, Niru's eyes lit up. Now, Hellable was the uncrowned king. Sosuke Aizen left everything to Hellable, which showed his trust in her. Who would have thought that Hellable was a spy? Dustless was a Shinigami, but from the current situation, he was not an enemy. "I helped Hellable remove her mask." Dustless said to Nero with endless temptation, "It's actually very simple, but also very difficult. At least in this world, I'm the only one who can do it." Hellable also instantly took off her mask. Her snow-white skin was exposed, and her huge meatball swayed. She didn't care about Dustless's existence. "Damn. It's even bigger than my head, this feeling. Teh." Wu Chen was dazzled for a while. His eyes were dazzled. If it weren't for Nilou in front of him, he really wanted to experience how it felt. Nero's eyes flashed with desire. Although Hellable's important subordinates were exposed, she didn't care. For Shulai, this kind of trivial matter was not worth mentioning. Growing up in an environment where the strong preyed on the weak, they only pursued power. "Greetings, my lord." Nero immediately knelt in front of Dustless to show her loyalty. She naturally knew why Dustless wanted to do this. "Get up, Sosuke Aizen is our enemy." Dustless chuckled and immediately raised his hand to help her up. Nero was slightly moved. Sosuke Aizen would not do this. "Bring your subordinates here, I can restore them." Looking at Nero's dying subordinates, Dustless wanted to be a good person to the end. Of course, to be precise, he wanted to win people's hearts. Super regeneration was not an ability that every Shulai had. Nero's subordinates did not have this ability, so their bodies were destroyed and they could only wait for death. This kind of problem was very tricky for Nilou, but it was just a small matter to Dustless. There was no problem at all. "Thank you, my lord." Nero was grateful and her tone was unusually excited. "It's rare to see a great Shulai like you." Dustless sighed with a thought-provoking tone. Nero was the only one in Hueco Mundo who would put down her face to beg for help for her subordinates. However, perhaps this was why she was so cute. Chapter 1122. Nero was filled with respect and admiration for Dustless. Perhaps it was because they were both rare females, or because they were both Vastolord, but she often interacted with her libel and knew her personality. Now that Dustless could pull this female iceberg to his side, Nero was surprised. Also because of her libel, she felt a sense of belonging to Dustless. After all, they were both Vastolord, and they shared a common language. Wait. Don't call me sir, call me young master." Dustless's face was stern, and his tone was firm. It was as if he would turn hostile if Nero called him sir again. Nero was stunned and subconsciously looked at her libel. The latter helplessly shook her head and frowned. Dustless's habit also gave her a headache. "You children don't understand the world of adults, and don't ask too much. In short, don't call me sir," Dustless said with an unfathomable look. "That's because everyone who calls me sir is a traitor." Wu Chen secretly complained in his heart. He immediately looked at Nero, who wanted to say something, and asked, "What's the matter? Tell me." Nero nodded and asked, "What's the next step of our plan? Are we going to kill Sosuke Aizen?" These words attracted Hurlabel's attention, and she eagerly looked at Dustless. "It's still too early," Dustless replied. The two women's eyes dimmed, and they seemed disappointed. After all, Sosuke Aizen was their mortal enemy. As for her libel, you can stay in Hueco Mundo. As for Nero, Dustless's eyes fell on Nero and circled her for a moment. He suddenly made a decision and said, "You will stay with me for the time being. There are still many things I need you to do." Nero didn't say anything. At the same time, the fierce battle in Soul Society continued. Although Yawatch himself didn't appear, the battle was still earth-shattering. The eyes of both sides were red with killing intent as they fiercely fought back and forth. The entire Quiet Soul Society was severely attacked and turned into a pile of ruins. Not only that, the scale of the war gradually spreading to the entire Soul Society. Blood dyed the ground red, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of blood. At a certain border area. Dow Breaker 90. Black Coffin. The razor-sharp black lights attacked from all directions. There were so many of them that it was not as simple as tens of thousands. All of them attacked the blonde man. Pucci! 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 The black light engulfed the golden-haired man's body, mercilessly slicing his body. Countless flashing blades attacked him together. However, he couldn't hurt him at all. His expression remained cold and indifferent from the beginning until the end. He was like a towering statue, and his handsome face seemed to have been frozen forever. There wasn't a trace of expression on his face. Sosuke Aizen. How dare you betray us? The golden-haired man raised his head and stared at the person who attacked him. His unchanging face finally had some expression. However, it was filled with cold killing intent. This person was the current leader of Wandenrake, Jugram. Because Yawatch was sealed, he was given the ruler's mask, and had been in charge of Wandenrake's affairs. At the same time, he was the next king and the leader of the Stern Cross Knights. I betrayed you? As if he heard the funniest joke in the world, Sosuke Aizen almost laughed out loud. At the same time, he was extremely angry. He no longer concealed his killing intent and erupted like a tide. Your subordinate, the Quincy master called Ligia Barrow, ambushed Silver and dared to target my Hangyu. You still dare to say that I betrayed you? Preposterous! Are all of you so shameless? Sosuke Aizen said angrily. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Jugram, his heart filled with anger. He had always been the one scheming against others, but this time, he was tricked by Jugram. Rita! Hearing this, Jugram was extremely gloomy. His eyes flashed with anger. In reality, he still didn't understand the situation. Originally, he ordered Rita Barrow to deal with the traitors in the modern world, Candace and Bambieta. Who would have thought that not only would he not return, he would even recklessly attack Soul Society. The most hateful thing was that he had revealed the secret of Wandenrake for 1,000 years. What made Jugram want to vomit blood was that this was in front of head Captain Yamamoto. Left with no choice, Jugram could only order all the members of Wandenrake to attack. Only then would they have the initiative. Humph, I have nothing to say about Rita Barrow, but it is a fact that you provided head Captain Yamamoto with information about Wandenrake. Jugram didn't reply. He still couldn't find Rita Barrow. He dared to have ideas about Hogyoku, so it is normal for me to betray you. Sosuke Aizen didn't care. He looked at Jugram with a burning desire to fight. Stop talking nonsense. Let me see how different you are as the leader of a knight regiment. Aizen's Ryatsu shot out a cold light, and his Ryatsu surged. He pounced on Jugram, intending to start a fierce battle. Serves you right. You two idiots who always think that you are infallible better die. Ever since the last lesson, Sosuke Aizen always hid Hogyoku on his body in case he was unprepared. These words naturally fell into Hogyoku's ears, or Dustless who was disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness. Chapter 1123. Dustless was the one who secretly instigated this war. His goal was to get rid of the wandless empire that was hiding in the dark. Only by crushing them could Dustless be at ease. After all, this colossus was even stronger than the Grim Reaper. Dustless could still clearly remember that when he fought against Squad Zero, Urabaker's 4 personal guards had crushed them with overwhelming strength. That's right, it was an instant kill. The most shocking thing was that when he fought against head Captain Yamamoto, although Urabaker had used a trick to get rid of him, it was enough to show Urabaker's foresight. Not only was he strong, but he was also unparalleled in wisdom. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. In Kongza City in the modern world, Candace and Bambieta had been waiting for Dustless for a long time. After all, Dustless was now equivalent to their boss. But what made the 2 girls stomp their feet was that when Dustless returned home, he brought back a woman with a voluptuous figure, Nero. Hey. I just have one more subordinate. Do you two need to be like this? On the sofa, Dustless looked at the 2 girls in front of him helplessly. Candace and Bambietta were looking at Dustless unkindly. Candace, in particular, seemed to be emitting lightning from her body. "You're just satisfying your own selfish desires." Bambietta grumbled unhappily. She was very dissatisfied with Nero's appearance. Selfish desires? Hearing this, Dustless stared blankly. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't understand what they were talking about. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Forgive me for being blunt, but the selfish desires you're talking about are..." Gulp! Dustless suddenly understood what the two girls meant. He smiled bitterly and said, "Don't tell me you two think I brought Nero back to satisfy my own desires?" Dustless asked with a dark expression. Nero was not bad. She had the face and the figure, but he wasn't the kind of person who couldn't move when he saw a woman. Humph. Isn't that the case? Do you think you can hide your wild ambitions from the two of us? Stop joking around. Sometimes, you're just a pervert. Bambietta sneered. Sometimes, you're just a pervert. Bullshit. Dustless cursed in his heart. When he brought Nero back, he really didn't think in that direction. If I don't teach the two of you a lesson, you won't know how powerful I am. In the future, you might even go overboard and accuse me. Dustless thought to himself as he looked at the two overbearing women. Hee. Dustless seemed to have thought of something as he let out a chilling laugh from his throat, causing the souls of the two women to tremble. "What do you want?" Looking at Dustless's green eyes, the two girls glanced at each other and instinctively felt that something was amiss. They said in unison, "I advise you not to have any crooked thoughts, otherwise..." Humph. The two of you once said that as long as Wandless Empire collapses, I can do whatever I want to the two of you, right? Dustless dragged out his words as he asked maliciously. Hearing this, Candace and Bambietta were stunned. Back then, when they were forced into a corner and were about to be destroyed by Quincy, they did say that. Now that Wandless Empire is fighting with the Death God, it's only a matter of time before it collapses. Now, the two of you can redeem your promise. Back then, the two of you said that you would be my slaves. Dustless smiled as he looked at the two women's delicate bodies. About that, we... Hearing this, the two women's faces flushed red. Candace argued with a red face, "Wandless Empire hasn't been destroyed yet, so it doesn't count." "That's right." Bambietta nodded. "You're twisting words and forcing logic." Dustless curled his lips in disdain as his gaze fell on Bambietta. Staring at her sparkling eyes and curvaceous body, he took advantage of her carelessness and pulled her into his arms. "You're an exception. You lost the bet back then, so you've been my maid for a long time," Dustless said with a smile as he blew hot air into Bambietta's ear. "Serving her young master in bed is also one of the duties of a maid, isn't it?" "You!" Bambietta's face flushed red as a strange emotion spread through her. Especially the scorching aura from Wu Chen's body, as well as the faint smell of sweat, it caused her mind to be in a mess. "Little Bambietta, just obey him." Seeing that Dustless was only circling around Bambietta, Candace relaxed and said with a smile, "You're his maid anyway." "You're right." Dustless gave her a look of praise, then looked at Candace who was beaming with joy. Feeling rather displeased, he said in a strange tone, "I don't want someone who offers herself to me. She probably stinks of sweat. She smells as good as you." Taking advantage of Bambietta's distraction, Dustless pecked her perfect face at lightning speed. "So good. So smooth." Bambietta was dumbfounded. She subconsciously touched her face that was still stained with saliva and was instantly petrified. "You." Candace was even more furious. She naturally understood that Wu Chen's eccentric voice was mocking her behind her back. He actually mocked her for stinking of sweat. It was difficult for Candace to remain calm. Just as the two women were about to explode in anger, a powerful spiritual pressure invaded them like a basin of cold water that extinguished their flames. Even Dustless frowned and restrained his playfulness. This spiritual pressure was extremely powerful, but it was not hostile. Instead, it deliberately lowered its spiritual pressure when it arrived to show its friendliness. Chapter 11:24. Dustless's playful heart gradually extinguished as he carefully sensed the changes in spiritual pressure. He could not help but be surprised because he felt that this abnormal spiritual pressure was very familiar. He had encountered it before. Who could it be? Dustless murmured, frowning as he thought to himself. It should be a powerhouse you once knew. The other party deliberately lowered his spiritual pressure as a gesture of goodwill. Otherwise, he would have already killed his way in. Candace showed her rare wise side as she analyzed carefully. Although the other party deliberately lowered his spiritual pressure and controlled it very skillfully, it's obvious that he has undergone years of training. He's obviously a captain-level Grim Reaper. No matter who he is, if he doesn't know what's good for him, I don't need to reason with him. Dustless stretched his waist lazily. No matter who the other party was, there was no need to care. If it was go against the current, he could just kill him. Soul Society was now in a mess anyway, and no one would care about what happened in the modern world. Candace and Bambietta looked at each other and fell silent. After all, Dustless was their boss, and now that their strength had been taken away, they would only be a hindrance, so they simply chose to turn a deaf ear. I hope I didn't choose the wrong person. Outside the villa, a middle-aged man with a hat muttered to himself. Oh, what a rare guest. Looking over, a young face wearing a kimono and holding a walking stick came into view. He was very young, but his eyes were exceptionally weathered. Isn't this Manager Pu Yuan? Suppressing the astonishment in his heart, Dustless asked indifferently, What brings you here from afar? Seeing that you are safe and sound, you seem to have expected that I would not be sealed. Your wisdom is really enviable. Manager Pu Yuan. Dustless emphasized his words, and there was a hint of killing intent in his words. The visitor was Kisuke Urahara. Of course. Kisuke Urahara replied calmly, ignoring Dustless's killing intent. Don't forget that I have been operating in the modern world for 100 years. When you came to settle down in the modern world, I discovered you. I see. Dustless didn't doubt his words and asked with interest, Then why is Urahara's store manager here? Don't tell me you're here to arrest me. Hearing this, Urahara Kisuke smiled bitterly. If he really had such strength, he would have gone to the Broken Soul Society. I'm here to seek cooperation. Urahara Kisuke took a deep breath and said solemnly, Although I don't know how you broke out of prison, since you escaped and didn't do anything to Soul Society, it means that you don't want Soul Society to be destroyed. After that, Urahara Kisuke looked at Dustless thoughtfully, looking forward to his answer. Idiot, it's only natural that I won't do anything. That's because someone else will do it for me. Dustless despised him in his heart, but he still pretended to be surprised and asked curiously, Then why is Manager Urahara here? Urahara Kisuke's expression suddenly stiffened, and he said solemnly, To be honest, I'm here to seek cooperation with you. Now Soul Society is on the verge of collapse, and there's a possibility that it will be wiped out by annihilation at any time. Dustless couldn't help but be startled when he heard this. He lowered his head and thought silently, but he was shocked. The Grim Reaper he expected was not so fragile. However, the current situation seemed to be the opposite of what he expected. Dustless hoped that Grim Reaper and Annihilation would both suffer, instead of a one-sided annihilation. It seems that it's just as I thought. Although I don't know the reason, he doesn't want Grim Reaper to be destroyed. Urahara Kisuke suddenly smiled and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He immediately remembered the terrible situation of Soul Society and said bluntly, Annihilation suddenly invaded, and Soul Society is now in imminent danger. Impossible. What about Head Captain Yamamoto and Squad Zero? What are they doing? Don't tell me they've all been wiped out. Dustless asked suspiciously, thinking of the strength of the Head Captain and Squad Zero. They are very strong, but Annihilation is also very strong. They launched a sneak attack first, and Grim Reaper is almost always suppressed. Urahara Kisuke smiled bitterly and said, This time, I came to cooperate with your excellency. Otherwise, Soul Society may step into a land of eternal damnation. Dustless's thoughts changed. Although he was happy that Squad Zero, Head Captain Yamamoto, and Sosuke Aizen were brutally beaten up, it was not in line with his original intention to be defeated by Annihilation. You want to drag me down with you? Dustless asked coldly after a moment. Urahara Kisuke paused for a moment and said, You're right to think so, but this is the current situation of Soul Society. It's true that we have a grudge in the past, but I hope we can put it aside. If Grim Reaper is destroyed, it won't be good for anyone. Dustless didn't doubt Urahara Kisuke's words. Urahara Kisuk's sincerity was enough to come alone. I really didn't expect. That group of annihilation is so strong that they can suppress Godei 13. Murmuring with a strange light in his eyes, there was a hint of murderous intent in his words. There are too many involved. Do you know Yawatch? Urahara Kisuk asked. The king of annihilation? Of course I know. Dustless replied indifferently. Not only did he know, but he also heard a lot about it. He stared at Urahara Kisuk and saw his helpless face and a headache. Obviously, something was wrong. Chapter 1125. Perhaps Urahara Kisuk's words were exaggerated, but it was undeniable that Soul Society was in a stalemate. After all, it was a fact that the Stern Ritter Legion had annihilated the Grim Reaper. Even Yawatch, Jugram, and the guards did not make a move. By the way, there is another important question. Speaking of this, Urahara Kisuk's face was extremely solemn. He pondered and said, "When I was still the captain of Soul Society, I heard a lot about Yawatch." About Yawatch? Dustless's face flashed with a hint of doubt. He suddenly realized something and said, "It should be the information about Yawatch found in the Daling Library." Indeed. Urahara Kisuk did not deny it. The Daling Library was indeed a mysterious place. But in it, I got a terrible news. After a while, Urahara Kisuk's voice was extremely heavy and hoarse. Dustless could even see the sweat on his temples. Get to the point. Waving his hand, Dustless's tone had a hint of irritation. He guessed that Urahara Kisuk was going to talk about Yawatch's background again. He had already guessed it. There was no need for Urahara Kisuk to say more. Urahara Kisuk was stunned. He remembered the serious situation and went straight to the point. He said cautiously, "In short, that group of Quincy is very troublesome. We can't let them live even if they die. No matter who wins or loses, this is a calamity." With a fierce look in his eyes, Urahara Kisuk stared at the puzzled Dustless and explained, "The common ancestor of Quincy is Yawatch. They call him the Sealed King. All Quincy have Yawatch's blood in their bodies. Their abilities also belong to Yawatch, including the Stern Ritter Legion that is attacking Soul Society now. Their abilities are all given by Yawatch. I also know this. Yawatch has an ability called Saint. After a Quincy dies, their souls all belong to Yawatch. He can use Saint to resurrect all those who died." Before Dustless could finish the last few words, his voice suddenly stopped. Looking at his face, it was like a dark cloud. He suddenly realized that once all the Quincy are annihilated, their souls will all return to Yawatch, which may also lead to Yawatch's early resurrection. It seems that you have realized the problem, so I don't need to explain more. Seeing this, Urahara Kisuk exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and sighed heavily. So no matter what, the one who loses in the end is Shinigami. Since you don't want Shinigami to be destroyed, we can work together. Are you not afraid that I will plot against you? After all, we have a grudge." Looking at this moment, Dustless was he Kisuk's Aaron, he Kisuk, Kisuk him he even the previous grudges. Was Kisuk. If I can, of course, I won't cooperate with you, but right now, I have no choice. The group of people in the Mask Legion has gone berserk, and I have no allies to choose from. Although there is still Ishin for me to choose, he has lost the power of Reaper, and he is having fun with his wife and children. Kisuk Urahara said in annoyance, like a defeated rooster. He was dispirited and cursed in his heart. You are being honest for once. Dustless smiled. He knew that this was the truth, because now the whole world was involved in the war. Even Sosuke Aizen was fighting against Jugram because of Dustless's instigation. No matter who was right or wrong between Kisuk Urahara and Dustless, it didn't matter, because there was only one way to go, and that was to cooperate with Dustless. In the whole world, only Dustless was free at the moment. Cooperation is possible. But, how do you plan to cooperate? First of all, what's in it for me? Dustless suddenly asked. Cooperation is naturally a win-win situation. If there are no benefits, Dustless won't do it. Kisuk Urahara hesitated when he heard this. He also understood the truth that you can't catch the wolf without sacrificing the child. However, what gave him a headache was that there were no benefits for Dustless. Soul Society is going to be finished, and this is the biggest disadvantage for you. Kisuke Urahara's eyes lit up, and he began to quibble. If that's the case, I'm sorry, I can't cooperate with you. Dustless shook his head and directly rejected Kisuke Urahara's conditions. What he meant was that he wanted Dustless to be a coolie, but he didn't get anything in return. Even if Quincy can really annihilate Shinigami, it will definitely be a lose-lose situation in the end. Speaking of this, Dustless's tone was obviously stagnant, and he smiled. I can just sit back and reap the benefits. When Quincy is exhausted, I will lead my subordinates to destroy all of them. Even if Yawatch really resurrects in advance, it can't be helped. I don't think I'm not his opponent. Kisuke Urahara's face was obviously ugly. He never doubted Dustless's strength. Even if his good friend Dustless fought one-on-one, the scale of victory may eventually tilt towards Dustless. After all, Dustless's strength was there, and Kisuke Urahara chose to cooperate with him because he knew how strong he was. In short, without benefits, everything was in vain. Chapter 11:26. Urahara Kisuke bowed his head and was silent for a while. His head was dizzy and very uncomfortable. After thinking hard for a long time, he still didn't think that he could give Dustless anything. Hee. Manager Urahara seems to be very confused. Dustless chuckled, then his face changed and said with a cunning look, How about I say a condition? Hearing this, Urahara Kisuke restrained his expression, and a cautious look flashed across his face. Staring at Dustless's gloomy face, Urahara Kisuke instinctively felt that something was wrong. He seemed to be making a deal with a devil. Being stared at by Dustless's shining eyes, Urahara Kisuke felt uncomfortable and had a feeling that a great disaster was coming. It doesn't matter if you don't agree, but one thing is certain, Soul Society will not last long. Dustless said calmly, and deliberately added, Head Captain Yamamoto is old, and Soul Society has been severely damaged by me before. The probability of them blocking Quincy's attack is 0, and they are close to extinction. Urahara Kisuke's face turned black and extremely ugly. He gritted his teeth and said, What's the condition? Let's hear it. I knew you would agree, so why are you hiding it? Dustless was very disdainful, and immediately thought for a moment and said, One day in the future, after Soul King falls, you must stand up and support me to become the new Soul King. Urahara Kisuke was petrified. His eyes widened, and stared at Dustless in a daze. Are you serious? Soul King will never fall. Hearing this, Urahara Kisuke's first thought was that he had misheard. The fall of Soul King is inevitable. Even if Yawatch lets Soul King go, Dustless will not let Soul King go. He will devour Soul King in some way, and his strength will be increased explosively. Don't think it's incredible, only I can replace Soul King in the world. Wu Chen raised his eyebrows in an unusually serious manner. Soon after, he changed the topic and said, Why do you think Squad Zero didn't kill me to prevent future troubles? In fact, Yawatch is a nightmare for them. After the Spirit King is killed, they can use me as a replacement. Urahara Kisuke nodded in agreement. The existence of Psionic King was a disgrace to Yawatch. Therefore, he wanted to kill Psionic King by any means possible. It was understandable that Team Zero wanted to find a spare tire. However, the existence of the Spirit King is extremely special. Can you really replace him? He is the foundation to maintain the operation of the world. Not everyone can do it. Urahara Kisuke was puzzled and full of doubts. You don't have to worry about this. Do you agree to my conditions or refuse? Dustless shook his head, apparently not interested in answering Urahara Kisuke's question. If you can really do it, I will definitely support you in the future. After all, this is not good for Soul Society. Urahara Kisuke finally chose to compromise. At the same time, he was relieved. If Dustless could really become the Spirit King, then it would be the best. It also meant that this mortal enemy would become an ally from now on. Even if this ally was very strange, and his temper was unpredictable, at least from now on, he could barely be regarded as a comrade in the trenches. You group of idiots are simply stubborn. Of course, I can't replace the Spirit King, but I can change to another way. A group of big idiots. Seeing Urahara Kisuke smiling, Dustless slandered in his heart. Frankly speaking, he really couldn't replace the Spirit King. After all, the Spirit King was created by human factors, and its purpose was to stabilize the entry and exit of souls. Although Dustless had many abilities, he was not omnipotent. He couldn't stabilize the entry and exit of souls in Hueco Mundo, the modern world, and Soul Society. However, if one day the Spirit King and Dustless merged into one, then it would be a different story. Of course, it didn't mean that Dustless himself and the Spirit King merged into one. Just thinking about the Spirit King's strange appearance, Dustless couldn't help but shudder. Absorb the Spirit King into the Hogyoku, let them merge into one, and then I merge with the Hogyoku, hee. Then I will be a brand new Spirit King. You group of idiots are really stupid. Looking at Urahara Kisuke with pity, Dustless's heart was full of sympathy. After absorbing the Spirit King, the Hogyoku naturally became a brand new Radiant, and could provide Dustless with more Ryatsu. Although the Hogyoku claimed to be able to evolve infinitely, but since its consciousness was destroyed by him, its ability was greatly reduced. After absorbing the Spirit King, it could naturally make up for the previous fragmentation, and it was possible to go to the next level. It could make up for the loss after erasing the Hogyoku, expand the Hogyoku's limit, and also become the god of death, the Spirit King, becoming the unique supreme leader, commanding the entire death god. Dustless obviously didn't suffer a loss in this deal. It was profitable, and it was very big. But then again, how do you want me to help Death God? Even if my identity is exposed, I don't want to become a wanted criminal in Soul Society again. Staring at Urahara Kisuke's proud smile, Dustless's tone left no room for negotiation. Of course, this is a must. Perhaps because he was in a good mood, Urahara Kisuke suddenly became incomparably flamboyant. He opened his white and blue folding fan, covering half of his face, and smiled. What you want to do is actually very simple. Simple? Hearing this, Dustless directly turned a deaf ear. Urahara Kisuke was willing to lower himself to cooperate with him. It was definitely not a simple task. At least, he couldn't do it himself, otherwise, he wouldn't have made an unnecessary move to cooperate with Dustless. Chapter 11:27. Quietly looking at the complacent Urahara Kisuke, Wu Chen couldn't help but feel funny, especially looking at the bandages all over Urahara Kisuke's body. His mind was even more strange. If Urahara Kisuke knew that the person who plotted against him was Wu Chen, who knew what he would think? But now, it didn't matter anymore. Your Excellency's task is very simple. Defeat the current leader of Quincy, Jugram. Hearing this, Dustless slightly raised his eyebrows, glanced at Urahara Kisuke suspiciously, and confirmed again. I said before, I won't expose my identity. Dustless rejected Urahara Kisuke without hesitation, feeling that this guy was pushing him into a fire pit. Of course I know this. There's no need to worry. I've prepared everything. Urahara Kisuke smiled mysteriously, looking very cunning and despicable. I've set up a barrier in Soul Society in advance. As long as we lure Jugram over and defeat this leader of Quincy, other people's attacks will collapse on their own. It's not luck that this guy was able to plot against Sosuke Aizen in the future. Such foresight. I have to guard against him. After taking a deep look at Urahara Kisuke, Dustless withdrew his gaze and nodded. No problem, I also want to see how different this Jugram is. Dustless's eyes were filled with expectation. He still remembered that Jugram had a special identity, the other half of Yawatch. The 75th district of Drifting Soul Street. Just lure Jugram there. Urahara Kisuke's eyes lit up, and at the same time, he disappeared with the wind. Hey. Are you really going to fight against that guy Jugram? He's very strong. He has the ability to kill a member of Stern Cross Knights in one hit. Candace and Bambietta came out of the door and said with a worried tone, That wretched uncle in the hat looks very cunning, don't be fooled. I've made up my mind. Since we'll meet sooner or later, I might as well take the opportunity to test him now. Dustless waved his hand and said with relief. The flames of war in Soul Society soared to the sky, forming a sea of flames. Sosuke Aizen and Jugram were fiercely fighting, but Aizen was obviously at a disadvantage, and even showed signs of defeat. It's normal for him to be at a disadvantage now, after all, he hasn't swallowed Hogyoku yet, and Sosuke Aizen's biggest trump card is useless against Jugram. Dustless murmured. In the distant battlefield, Aizen Sosuke had been forced to retreat. He hadn't merged with Hogyoka yet, and for some reason, his Kyoka Suigetsu ability was ineffective against Jugram. I'll let you go and bring that guy over. This guy's strength is strengths' release. S's. He. On the other side, Aizen Sosuke felt the tyrannical power coming from the Zanpakuto, and his face became silent. I'll let you know the consequences of betraying Wandless Empire. Jugram's killing intent surged, and his spiritual pressure went berserk. Just as he was about to deal a fatal blow to Aizen Sosuke, several sharp lights locked onto him. Whoosh! Whoosh! Several transparent arrows shot out from the side, wanting to tear Jugram into pieces. Naive! With a sweep of his sword, a huge ray of white light shot out. Crack! The incoming arrows were instantly reduced to ashes, but Jugram's slash was unstoppable. It flew toward the attacker like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Agility. A ripple appeared in Jugram's eyes, and he was very surprised when he saw who it was. He immediately abandoned Aizen Sosuke and chased after Barrow. Although I don't know what's going on, this is good. I don't want to expose my strength either. It's best if you guys can kill more death gods. That would be for the best. Aizen glanced at Jugram and turned to leave. Stop right there, agility! Jugram roared. It was because of him that Quincy, who had been hiding for thousands of years, had to resurface. He still needed to solve all the mysteries. Tiz! On the 75th Street, Dustless, who was resting, opened his eyes and stared at the figure coming from the horizon. A teasing smile appeared on his face. Agility. Barrow was controlled by his Rinnegan. After a while, agility. Barrow landed on the ground and strangely disappeared. This is... Jugram narrowed his eyes. His thick black eyebrows were involuntarily raised. His gaze immediately spread out and a smiling Wu Chen was reflected in his eyes. "'Tis you?" Jugram was stunned and frowned. "'Tis you who should be suppressed. Why are you here?" Dustless was unmoved when he heard that. He smiled lazily and said, "I can only tell you one thing. The person who is going to be suppressed today is called Jugram Ward." "'Tis you?" Jugram sneered. "'Tis you who thinks that Team Zero can't do anything to you, and I can't do anything to you? Don't." Bang! Before Jugram could finish his sentence, a flash of light came and he was sent flying by Dustless' sneak attack. I hate people like you who have no strength but are arrogant. Chapter 1128. This kick was merciless. It sent Jugram flying hundreds of meters away. A large footprint could be seen on his handsome face. "Humph! You're asking for it." Dustless sneered in his heart. It was fine if Yawatch wanted to die. After all, his strength was there for all to see. However, this Jugram was just a personal bodyguard. To put it bluntly, he was just a lackey. Not bad. You're quite strong. Jugram, who had stood up, was indifferent. It was as if Dustless had kicked someone else. He was very quiet and cold. He did not even touch the wound and ignored it. "This guy is quite open-minded," Dustless said in astonishment as he looked at Jugram. "But that's all there is to it." With a cold laugh, Jugram formed a great sage bow in an instant. It was a weapon specially used by Quincy. Great sage bow. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Following Jugram's order, a dense rain of arrows instantly shot out. The sharpness of the arrows made one unable to look at them directly. The sharp whistling sound made one's scalp go numb. The attacks were ruthless. They were aimed at Dustless's eyes, heart, and head. Heh. Insignificant skill. Glancing faintly at the arrows that were completely compressed by spiritual particles, Wu Chen directly ignored them. His body directly glowed with a faint light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The cold light pierced through Dustless's body. However, he was completely unscathed. The damaged parts only glowed with a golden light. Then they were repaired. He was completely fine. Looks like Bazabi was right. You do have the ability to ignore physical attacks. A strange emotion appeared on Jugram's clean face. He lowered his tactics and spoke with a rare gentleness in his voice. The Wandless Empire needs experts like you. If you're willing to join us, we can let bygones be bygones. Your friends will also receive the most sincere care. Dustless could not help but laugh. He teased, "If you chop off Yawach's head and give it to me as a urinal, I'll consider it." "You're courting death." Hearing this, thick killing intent flashed across Jugram's face, and his spiritual pressure soared by countless times. "You think you're invincible?" That was unrealistic. According to the information that Busby got from you, the ability of the holy word can reach your body after you enter the holy body. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 pairs of pure white wings appeared behind Jugram's back. They shone brightly and looked extremely holy. However, in Dustless's eyes, it was an eyesore. "Do you think you're an angel just because you have 2 chicken feathers?" Dustless mocked. His pupils widened, and the black flames began to burn endlessly. Tensho! Netherworld flames burned on both sides of Jugram's wings, rapidly devouring the surface area of his pure white wings. He was slightly taken aback when he saw this, but he immediately swung his blade without hesitation. Puchi! The pure white wings were ruthlessly chopped off by Jugram, and there wasn't the slightest bit of hesitation on his face. "This fellow seems very difficult to deal with." Seeing this, Dustless frowned slightly. Photons condensed in his hand and compressed into a high-density greatsword. Looking at the greatsword in Dustless's hand, Jugram asked, "Is this your Bankai?" "I don't have a Zanpakuto." Hearing this, Dustless replied in disappointment. This was the only regret in his life. Then he calmly changed the topic and said, "But I do have a Zanpakuto, so I don't need it to deal with a small pawn like you." Dustless's sarcasm would have angered even a person with a good temper. Jugram, who had an unkind expression, pounced over with a twisted face. Fylian kick. Like a space jump, Jugram instantly appeared behind Dustless. Then, a sharp aura swept up and mercilessly cut toward Dustless's head. Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force erupted rapidly. Caught off guard, Jugram was instantly sent flying by this force. Seeing this, Dustless's eyes shot out a cold light. He did not stop and chased after him. The chakra in his body boiled, and his gaze locked onto Jugram's torn clothes. Dustless's eyes widened and he shouted, "Heavenly hand power." Dustless, who was 20 to 30 meters away, instantly appeared behind Jugram. A huge flash of light filled with destructive aura mercilessly greeted his head. Light speed kick. Resplendent flashes of light rumbled and annihilated Jugram's entire body. The powerful force kicked him into the air. "Go to hell, eyesore of a small fry." Dustless, whose eyes were filled with murderous intent, was as terrifying as a prehistoric beast. His spiritual pressure burst out like a torrential rain, faintly revealing a turbid coat of arms, an unruly and arrogant talent. Surge, negation, rebound, extend to the ground, know your own powerlessness. Staring at the charred figure in the sky, Dustless finished his chant and spoke in a cold voice. Breaking the Tao's 90 black coffin. Under Dustless's all-out chant, the power of the black coffin instantly increased. It was eerie and terrifying. An incomparably huge black coffin stood on the ground, emitting an ancient and decaying aura. Inside it, countless sharp invisible blades suddenly appeared and attacked Jugram's body at the same time. Fortunately, Urahara Kisuk had set up a barrier in advance, so no one saw this exaggerated scene. The sharp edges of the black coffin tore Jugram into pieces at the same time. Chapter 1129. Perhaps it was a misconception, but Dustless actually saw Jugram break out of his cocoon and be reborn. "He's actually fine?" After a while, Dustless said in shock after confirming that he was not mistaken. Looking closely, Jugram's body was clean and unharmed. He was completely unharmed. He had not been attacked at all. He was completely at ease. It was as if none of the attacks had hit him. "What's going on?" Stroking his chin, Dustless looked left and right. He was sure that his previous series of attacks had heavily injured Jugram. Even if he had been blessed by the heavens and survived, he should have at least been injured. But now, he was completely unharmed. "What's that?" Looking up at the sky, Dustless suddenly realized that the sky had darkened. A strangely shaped scale was floating in the sky, leaning toward Dustless. This seems to be Jugram's ability. In the original work, He used this ability to break Song Du's ability and instantly kill him, Dustless pondered. Looking at the unscathed Jugram, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. Jugram's code name in the Wandless Empire was B, and his ability was Balance. This was the scale floating in the sky. Once the scale fell toward Dustless, his abilities and strength would be unlimitedly weakened. I see. Suddenly understanding, Dustless praised. The black coffin that attacked you, as well as the body art from before, were all weakened by you. No wonder you were unaffected. You're not simple. You. Hearing this, Jugram did not feel any joy. Instead, his brows furrowed tightly. His wariness toward Dustless had reached an unprecedented level. He rarely made a move, but Dustless had seen through his ability. You're right. Since his ability had been seen through, Jugram did not hide it and directly admitted it. He said calmly, "This is my holy word ability, Balance. When the scale floating in the sky falls toward you, all of your abilities will be weakened. Your skills will not harm me at all, just like that ghost path just now. It has no effect on me at all." He is indeed very strong. Dustless didn't comment when he heard this, and then he took the initiative to launch an awe-inspiring attack. Dao Breaker 88. Flying Dragon Strikes the Thief. In the blink of an eye, a thick beam of light shot out, engulfing and annihilating Jugram. Who would have thought that Jugram, who was bathed in the light, would be completely unscathed? He didn't react at all, and his face remained as calm as an ancient well. What was even more shocking was that he was slowly walking over against the light. In his hand was a cold glinting sword, and he strolled over in a relaxed manner. Damned Yawach! Upon seeing this, Dustless couldn't help but curse his friend Habak. That was because all of the Star-Crossed Knight's abilities came from him, and this inconceivable balance ability was far too overpowered. Dustless's attacks were weakened, and the damage he dealt to Jugram was 0. Swish! Swish! Jugram's speed was 10 times faster than before, and he couldn't even catch a glimpse of his shadow. By the time he realized this, Jugram had already sliced through his body. At the crucial moment, Dustless decisively used God's might to materialize himself. You didn't hit me? Jugram was stunned, and his tone was filled with doubt. He subconsciously looked at Dustless, but what he got in return was a cold beam of light. Poochie! The sword light cut through Jugram's body, and the blood on the blade of the heavenly sword of clouds evaporated rapidly. Jugram looked at the wound on his waist and felt the piercing pain all over his body. He couldn't believe it and said, "Impossible, you should have been weakened by my ability." Weakened? You have indeed weakened me. Dustless shook his head. His black coffin didn't have any effect on Jugram, and this explained everything. However, even if you weaken me without limit, the difference between the two of us is still like heaven and earth. It's just like an ocean. Even if you suck in 99% of its water, it's not something a stream can compare to. Do you understand what I mean? Jugram's face turned green. How could he not understand what Dustless meant? He sneered and said, "In other words, you can deal with me with the remaining 1% of your strength?" As expected of Yawach's loyal lackey, so smart. Dustless gave him a thumbs up, and his expression was extremely cold. He unleashed all of his strength and charged at Jugram with his sword. His expression was calm and fearless. Jugram's balancing ability was indeed a heaven-defying and invincible existence. When one side of the sky was lowered, the enemy would be weakened in all aspects. On the other hand, Jugram's strength would increase exponentially. However, for a skill like God's Might, it was useless no matter how much it was weakened. This skill wasn't an attack in the first place. Bang bang bang. The two of them fought back and forth fiercely. Saber light and sword shadows flashed and sparks danced in the air. Boom boom boom. Along with a loud boom, a white figure was sent flying. Dustless had won for now. Huff, huff, huff. This bastard's ability actually reduced spiritual pressure, stamina, effort, and even the chakra in my body to a negligible level. Dustless panted heavily. Just a few rounds of fighting and he was already half dead from exhaustion. Chapter 11:30. Dustless was extremely depressed. In an instant, he felt that he had turned into an old man who was hundreds of years old. Walking was extremely tiring, and his whole body was being eroded by some mysterious power. He was like an old man with a candle in the wind, and his strength was being stripped away. In an instant, he became weak and powerless. It was as if a gentle breeze could blow him away. This power is really troublesome. Dustless's old face was flushed red, and he almost fainted from exhaustion. Jugram's face didn't change from the beginning to the end. Looking at Dustless, his eyes were filled with pure pity, and he said coldly, "It's already commendable that you can hold on until now. Now, let me purify you. You should be proud to die in my hands, and you should be able to rest in peace in the underworld for scheming against our wandless empire." After saying that, Jugram stepped forward gracefully. "You want to purify me? You overestimate yourself." Dustless coldly snorted, full of contempt and provocation. The eye power of Samsara's Sharingan went berserk. Even if 99% of the eye power was suppressed, the eye power that erupted was still extremely powerful. After all, Dustless was the main body of the Jubi, and his data in all aspects were perfect. Tomb of Samsara. Border prison. Several shadows suddenly appeared, and under the control of Dustless's mind, they immediately rushed towards Jugram. Bang bang bang. Dustless's shadows caught Jugram and beat him up without mercy. The most heaven-defying thing was that these shadows all used armament hockey. That fist, which was harder than a meteor, smashed into Jugram's body, causing him to howl in pain and let out a miserable cry. Boom boom boom. As the foot fell, Jugram's whole body was blasted away by the shadow formed by Tomb of Samsara, border prison. His whole body was covered in blood, and his handsome face was badly mutilated. It seems that he used blood-calming equipment. Otherwise, he should have been beaten to a pulp. Dustless muttered in his heart. At the same time he jokingly said, "Yo! How did you get beaten up like this? Didn't you say that you want to purify me? Come here." Dustless was full of disdain and contempt, giving people the feeling that he was a villain who had succeeded. He didn't have the slightest good impression of this Jugram. If it wasn't for the chakra and the various powers in his body being weakened, he would have definitely beaten this guy into a pulp. Looking at his eyes that seemed to see through everything, Dustless's stomach, and he couldn't help but want to vomit. As I said before, even though the river dried up, it's not something that a small stream like you can compare, Dustless said indifferently. Perhaps Jugram couldn't see it, but there were several shadows in front of him. It was impossible for Jugram to get close to Dustless. What kind of despicable trick you? Jugrams of Samsaras ofs. After being beaten up for no reason, he was abnormally angry, and the most annoying thing was that he couldn't even find a trace of the enemy. They're right in front of you, but you can't see them. Dustless shook his head in pity, full of sarcasm. The shadows he formed using Samsara's tomb, border prison were all standing in front of Jugram, but he couldn't see them. "Since you've shown me such a powerful ability, I'll also open your eyes." Dustless's face turned red, and he laughed sinisterly. At the same time, the shadows controlled by his mind began to attack Jugram again. Without exception, their fists were all covered with armament hockey. Poochie! Caught off guard, Jugram was sent flying by the incoming fist. His handsome chin was knocked askew. His teeth fell to the ground, and blood dyed his mouth red. Blood-calming ama. A large amount of Ryatsu was injected into the meridians under the skin, and the surface was immediately covered with dense lines. Jugram, who was helpless, could only passively take the beating. He was blinded, and he couldn't see who attacked him at all. In just a few seconds, Jugram was beaten black and blue. His whole body was dripping with blood, and he looked very miserable. His whole person was like a prisoner on death row, and he was extremely embarrassed. "I won't let you die so easily. What you've given me, I'll return to you hundreds of times," Dustless said coldly. He gave off the feeling of a demon, and there was no human aura at all. Boom boom boom. An extremely powerful energy beam erupted, raging like a hurricane. The enchantment set up by Urahara Kisuk creaked and gradually showed signs of collapsing. "It seems that I can't play anymore," Dustless muttered to himself. The hostility in his eyes was buried deep. He looked at Jugram as if he was looking at a corpse, without any emotion. "Although I don't know what's going on, one thing is certain. The person behind this technique must be..." Bang bang bang. Before Jugram's words fell, Another wave of punches and kicks annihilated him, ruthlessly destroying him. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Shoo shoo shoo. At this moment, a violent roar sounded, and after images that were difficult to catch with the naked eye came head-on. They almost instantly arrived in front of Dustless, and the sharp Ryatsu sword slashed down. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. The sudden change made Jugram dumbfounded as he stared blankly at the dazzling sky in front of him. He suddenly felt that he was very small, like an hourglass, and was easily subdued in an instant. Chapter 1131. The golden light and the void connected together, and the scale and momentum were incomparably vast. It was so dazzling that Jugram could not open his eyes. At this moment, 2 daggers slowly wrapped around Jugram. His arms and legs were all bound by golden chains, and he was easily subdued like a dumpling. "What is this?" Jugram muttered. He swayed his body and released his spiritual pressure at the same time, trying to use his powerful strength to shatter the chains. However, the effect caused Jugram's eyes to widen. His spiritual pressure had no effect on these golden chains at all. This is called the Heaven Lock. Dustless's eyes were exceptionally dim and powerless. His entire body was filled with powerlessness. After seeing Jugram being subdued, he directly sat on the ground. Heaven Lock. Hearing this, Jugram repeated the name. He knew all kinds of death gods Bankai and the Ghost Tao, but he realized that he had never seen this Heaven Lock before. It seemed to have jumped out of the category of Death God. It was not just Death God, but also Void and Quincy. Humph. Although I am surprised that you have such a trump card, no matter what moves you use, they are useless against me. Jugram's confidence rose from the ashes, and he proudly said, "In front of God, nothing is worth mentioning." Hee hee. Hearing these arrogant words, Dustless's face was filled with smiles. He was abnormally bright as he smiled and said, "What a coincidence. My Heaven Lock is effective against gods. It is a type of God of Law weapon." What was a God of Law? It could be understood that it was specially used to restrict gods. Nonsense. Hearing this, Jugram laughed coldly and unleashed even more powerful spiritual pressure. At the same time, his heaven-defying ability of balance was strengthened without limit, weakening the effects of the Heaven Lock. I will show you that the so-called God of Law weapon is actually a piece of scrap metal. Under Jugram's effect, the golden Heaven Lock instantly turned into a trash-like existence. It lost its previous golden luster and became dim. Some parts even rusted. Can such a thing still be called God of Law? Jugram coldly asked. His spiritual pressure spread out in all directions. Just as he was about to completely shatter the Heaven Lock, a change suddenly occurred. Clang, clang, clang. Heavy spiritual pressure washed over the rusty Heaven Lock, but it didn't seem to have any effect. The only thing it did was make a series of crisp sounds. Apart from that, there was nothing special about it. How is this possible? Jugram's pupils shrank when he saw this. His pupils dilated several times as he looked at the firm heavenly lock. His heart turned cold and he was so shocked that he was speechless. She subconsciously raised her eyes and saw Dustless looking calm and composed, as if everything was within his expectations. The uniqueness of the Heaven Lock is not its material, but its uniqueness. Dustless's voice sounded very old as he explained in a neither slow nor slow manner, God of Justice is a type of rule. It has nothing to do with the material used to create the Heaven Lock. What do you mean? Hasworth, who was at a loss, frowned slightly. He felt that Dustless was implying something. The meaning is very simple. Dustless smiled and explained, it's because you're a god that the power of the Heavenly Lock can be maximized. Nonsense. Snorting coldly, Jugram said with contempt, I'll tear this piece of scrap metal apart for you to see. This enchantment won't last long. Don't waste my time. Dustless glanced at Jugram, who had a ferocious expression, and lowered his right arm. The light in the void instantly shone to the extreme. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Countless divine weapons came crashing down. The sharp cold light was enough to cut through mountains and separate the sky. The void was replaced by a sea of weapons. Gulp. Bean-sized beads of sweat dripped down from Jugram's forehead. Seeing this, Jugram struggled even harder, but it was useless. He could only watch as the weapons came at him. He was destined to be pierced full of holes. Pucci! 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 The sound of his body being cut apart didn't stop. Jugram was in an abnormally miserable state. His body was pierced by all kinds of weapons. It was too horrible to look at. His limbs, internal organs, and even his head and throat were all severely injured. You bastard! Jugram used all his strength to speak in a hoarse voice. His throat was already damaged, and it was very difficult for him to speak. He said with hatred, "Don't think that you've won. I will make a comeback." "I know that." Dustless smiled calmly. His body had completely recovered, which meant that Jugram was completely done for. However, this was only a temporary victory. After they died, their souls would all belong to Yawach. They could still use their saint abilities to revive again. Unless they killed Yawach himself. So what if I make a comeback? I can kill you once. Do you think there won't be a next time? Idiot, I can only tell you that it will be even easier to kill you next time. Dustless didn't care. He wouldn't fall for the same ability twice. Jugram laughed sinisterly and shouted, "Don't be so. Pucci." Before he could finish his sentence, Jugram's body was cut into two. The cold light of the heaven cluster cloud sword pierced through his body and cut him in half mercilessly. You don't even realize your own identity. A lackey will always be a lackey. His indifferent gaze swept across the ground. Jugram's body instantly burned with black flames. The flames only stopped when he completely disappeared. Chapter 1132. Dustless looked expressionlessly at Jugram, who was being burned by the raging fire. His heart was abnormally calm. At this moment, the barrier set up by Urahara Kisuk finally couldn't bear the burden and collapsed. The scorched earth on the ground was exposed to the air. You asked for it. After a while, Dustless murmured. Just as he was about to leave, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared. Are you here to die? Dustless asked indifferently. The newcomer seemed to have noticed that Jugram's spiritual pressure had disappeared. He stared at Dustless ferociously, and the spiritual particles around him were filled with flames. It was obvious that this person was about to go berserk. He locked onto Dustless, and the violent spiritual pressure fluctuations directly shook the ground. Dustless looked up and glanced at this person. He said indifferently, "Even Yawach won't revive someone like you after you're killed. You're different from those guards and Jugram. You're just a small chess piece." Dustless said coldly. The newcomer was Busby, who had been killed by him before. Who would have thought that after being revived, he would come to die again? Hugo, Jugram's spiritual pressure has disappeared. Did you do it? Busby tried his best to retract the flames that were about to erupt from his body, and waited for Dustless's answer with a twisted face. Crack, crack, crack. A crisp sound of bones rang out and drilled into Dustless's ears. It came from Busby's body. Dustless saw that he was so angry that his bones were creaking. As you can see, Dustless still maintained his indifference. His indifferent tone was as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Impossible. You can't kill Hugo at your level. You must have used some despicable and insidious trick. As if he had been greatly insulted, Busby roared furiously. You're no different from a wild beast. Dustless shook his head and glanced at Busby. He gave him a look of pity and turned to leave. He had no desire to kill someone who was filled with anger and had already killed once. Stop right there. With a low roar, Busby turned into a flaming hurricane and rushed out, instantly sealing off Dustless's path of retreat. Get out of my way before I have the thought of killing you. Dustless's eyes flashed with killing intent. He closed his eyes and muttered to himself, as if lamenting why there were so many idiots who overestimated themselves in this world. His expression was as ferocious as a wild beast's. Busby didn't appreciate it. He flicked his fingers, gathering spiritual particles, and a sharp light shot out. Holy Annihilation Arrow. Sensing the incoming killing intent, Dustless suddenly opened his eyes. Many arrows compressed by Lingzi pierced toward him. Dustless's face flashed with a touch of cold hostility. Binding Tao 81. Space shattering. The transparent wall cut off the world. Even though it was as thin as a cicada's wing and seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow, Dustless was as immovable as a mountain. His quiet appearance was extremely calm. Bang bang bang. After a few consecutive collisions, the transparent barrier remained unmoved and defended against Busby's attacks. Boom boom boom. Seeing this, Busby didn't have the slightest awareness of being weak. Instead, the Ryatsu all over his body rolled, and he planned to fight to the death. You're hopeless. Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense. His pupils slightly widened, and ripples surged out from his Rinnegan. The 9 mysterious Magatomas shook, and he disappeared without a trace. Where did he go? Busby was taken aback and immediately looked for Dustless's trace in exasperation. Poochie! A sharp light came from behind and instantly pierced through Busby's body. When did this happen? Looking at the scorching light soared in his chest in disbelief, Busby's face was as pale as paper. Sensing that his vitality was rapidly draining, he used all his strength to turn his head. The one holding the sword was Dustless with a deathly expression. It's impossible for you to spy on heavenly hand power at your level. Dustless spat out a sentence from the corner of his mouth. His entire body was filled with murderous intent. He immediately lifted his thumb and aimed at Busby's head. Tao Breaker 88. Flying Dragon strikes the thief. A thick flash erupted from the tip of his finger, and Busby, who was close to him, instantly collapsed. Not even a corpse was left behind. He was directly crushed into dust by the flash. Ah! You're really strong. No wonder you can face the captain and Team Zero alone. At this moment, a shocked voice suddenly sounded. A young man wearing a kimono, a hat, and a crutch descended from the sky. Of course, his voice was filled with fear. Glancing at him, Dustless retracted his gaze. This person was Urahara Kasuke. You're the one who lured that mohawk here, right, Manager Urahara? Closing his eyes, Dustless carefully sensed the changes within a radius of tens of miles. He opened his eyes again, revealing a strange look. Urahara Kasuke, you seem to have misunderstood something. I'm cooperating with you, not being used by you. Revealing a thick killing intent, the ground was covered with a layer of frost. Dustless warned, once I feel that I'm not getting any benefits from cooperating with you, I'll immediately stop and even fight with you. Using you as a tool? How is that possible? Everything is a misunderstanding. Urahara Kasuke made his signature move, covering half of his face with a fan, and smiled. That guy seems to be called Busby. He's a close friend of Jugram, who was killed by you. It's normal for him to feel his spiritual pressure disappear and come to help, Captain Dustless. I hope so. Dustless directly refused and then added, Don't call me Captain. That's all in the past. Now, I only have one purpose, to replace the Soul King. That means we still have room for cooperation. Happy cooperation in the future. Urahara Kasuke laughed, but his laughter was very embarrassed. It sounded very forced, full of vigilance and fear. He clearly saw the battle just now. If it weren't for his heaven-defying ability, Urahara Kasuke was sure that Jugram would have been instantly killed. Chapter 1133. Urahara Kasuke had a new understanding of Dustless's strength. He had already reached the realm of perfection. Now that he was so terrifying without the Hogyoku, once he got the Hogyoku, he would become a godlike enemy. Just imagining it. His blood and breathing would not be smooth. The basis of our cooperation will never change, you can rest assured. Urahara Kasuke patted his thin and weak chest and promised. His words were full of sincerity and sincerity. I hope so. After glancing at Urahara Kasuke, Dustless turned and left. What happened to Soul Society had nothing to do with him. Now that the situation was settled, Jugram, the culprit, had fallen, it was equivalent to the entire Quincy losing its brain, and it was close to extinction. Dustless and Urahara Kasuke brushed past each other, leaving him with a back view. After taking a deep look at Dustless, Urahara Kasuke no longer spoke. Time flew by, and 5 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Everything had changed. In the great battle of Soul Society, Death God finally annihilated Quincy after much effort. However, Death God's side was also seriously injured, and the entire Soul Society was almost destroyed. All the captains, including the head captain, were seriously injured. What Dustless cared about the most was not the Quincy, but the major incident that happened a day ago. As expected, they were resurrected early. In the modern world, Dustless, who was leaning on the sofa, muttered to himself. Just yesterday, all the Quincy in the world, only those with impure bloodlines, died inexplicably. Dustless knew that this was Yawach's doing. Shaking his head, he did not think about it anymore. Dustless also had no choice. Yawach was hiding in the dark, and his exact location was unknown. He could only wait silently for the day Yawach made his move. However, that old man must be about to explode. After a while, Dustless's lips curled up, revealing a gloating smile. The complete annihilation of Wandless Empire was enough to make Yawach vomit blood. Although Yawach could resurrect everyone with the saint ability, that was only if there were enough souls. He had just been resurrected, and he already needed to extract the power of Quincy to recover his strength, let alone resurrecting the Stern Ritter. Even if he could do it, he was powerless. At this moment, within the Wandless Empire, a figure was gritting his teeth in anger as he looked at the desolate ice palace. Who did this? Hysterical howls that contained overflowing hostility spread out, causing the entire world to tremble. The scene was especially horrifying. This person had long black hair and a beard. He had a deep and ferocious appearance. His eyes were red, and his expression was frightening. He had 3 silver medals on his collar, and he wore a dark red cloak. It was Yawach. Your Majesty, this is all my fault. Behind him stood a golden-haired man. He was slender, handsome, and had a noble aura. He was Jugram, who had been killed by Dustless 5 years ago. However, Jugram was far too important to Yawach. Even though Yawach's current strength and soul were insufficient, he still forcibly used Saint to revive him. However, this made Yawach, who had just regained consciousness, even more fragile. The person who started all this is called Dustless. He controlled Li Jie and purposely exposed our tracks to Soul Society. I had no choice but to order the Stern Ritter Knights to launch a sneak attack on Soul Society to seize the initiative. Unfortunately, I was no match for that man, and was killed by him. Jugram said helplessly. His tone was filled with disappointment. Even you were no match for him. Yawach was stunned when he heard this. The ferocity in his eyes was extinguished. He muttered, if that's the case, your failure is understandable. You were no match for him, and those useless pawns were no match for him either. It's normal for them to be annihilated. Yawach had no doubts about Jugram's strength. Otherwise, he would not have ordered Jugram to be his personal god. What should we do now, Your Majesty? Your Majesty, Jugram asked with a headache. Now that Yawach had just been resurrected, he was even weaker than before. Humph. Then I will bear with it for now and take a step back. When I regain my full strength in the future, I will cut that Shinigami who ruined my plans into pieces. Yawach screamed like a ghost. Time passed quickly, and a few years passed. Shinozaki Ichigo gradually grew up, and unfortunately, because of Dustless's instigation, he became Aizen Sosuke's research target. Can the power of Hollow, Shinigami, and Quincy really exceed the limit? Aizen Sosuke muttered to himself in the dark underground laboratory of Soul Society. Of course. Hogyoku let out a dazzling light. Dustless, who was disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness, said, now is the time to awaken Shinozaki Ichigo's power. Aizen nodded and did as he was told. He instinctively thought that he had tamed Hogyoku. It seems that my plan should begin. Dustless, who was far away in the modern world, had a lot of thoughts. He had already colluded with Urahara Kisuke, and everything was ready. They were just waiting for Aizen Sosuke to awaken Shinozaki Ichigo's power. Chapter 1134. Over the years, Dustless disguised himself as Hogyoku's consciousness and often bewitched Aizen, and many impossible things became possible. As a result, Aizen was led by the nose by Dustless without knowing it. There is no suitable candidate for the Shinigami in the modern world. In the dark laboratory, Aizen observed Soul Society through the crystal screen, and from time to time, he would choose a suitable Shinigami. Let Rukia go. After a while, Dustless disguised himself as Hogyoka's consciousness said. Her. Aizen heard this, and a young girl immediately appeared in his mind. He frowned and said, "She seems kind. If she's not the Hollow's opponent, it would be bad." "It doesn't matter." Hogyoka's consciousness explained, "I think she's just right. She has a kind heart. If it's someone else, they might not lend the power of Shinigami to Shinozaki Ichigo." You're right. I neglected it." Sosuke Aizen nodded and agreed with Hogyoka's idea. He immediately went to Central 46 to give orders. The modern world in the villa he robbed. Dustless looked at the star badge in his hand. The quality was exquisite, shining, and filled with a special power. It looked very mysterious. This was the star badge that Quincy used to steal the Shinigami's Bankai. Hehe. Jugram left me something good. I thought I would need to use the system to steal Captain Yamamoto's Bankai, but it seems that I don't need it anymore. Dustless looked at the star badge in his hand and smiled viciously. Once he took the Bankai, it would be a huge blow to him. The strongest Shinigami was only in name. At the same time, 3 days later, Rukia came to Kozaku as Dustless expected. Aizen deliberately magnified the hollow to get close to Ichigo, and Rukia, who detected the presence of the Grand Hollow, gradually approached the Kurosaki family. Dustless hid in the dark and silently observed this scene. Ayo ayo ayo. The hysterical roar resounded through the sky. Shinozaki Ichigo, who was born with strong spiritual power, immediately noticed this abnormality. He saw the invading great void through the window and quickly ran downstairs. "Is that Kurosaki Ichigo?" Dustless thought to himself as he hid in the alleyway, revealing half of his face. An orange-haired youth came into view. His appearance and temperament were ordinary. The first impression he gave others was that he was asking for a beating. No wonder this brat always attracts a group of people to beat him up. Dustless pursed his lips. The first impression that Kurosaki Ichigo gave people was that he was a delinquent and very arrogant. Pucci! 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 The grand voids that rushed over were obviously not a match for Rukia, and they were all cleansed in no time. Dustless could not help but be stunned by her straightforward manner. That idiot Sosuke Aizen. The current Ruki is no longer the same as before. Her slash and transient steps have improved tremendously. Dustless frowned. If this continues, the chances of awakening Kurosaki Ichigo's death god power will be 0. Kakaka. The void behind him suddenly exploded, and a powerful grand voids came out from it. Dustless deliberately opened the black cavity and released the grand voids to besiege Rukia, until she was exhausted. Boom boom boom. A large Jillian came out from it, and a giant flash came out from its mouth. The dark sky was dyed red, and it was filled with a demonic luster of destruction. The target was not Rukia, but Kurosaki Ichigo. This damned Jillian just doesn't listen to me. Seeing this, Dustless's heart sank. He looked at Rukia, who was wiping her sweat, and his heart fell to the bottom. He was sure that Rukia would not be able to withstand Jillian's void flash. She was too immature now. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dustless was pondering, and a giant flash came down and blasted towards Kurosaki Ichigo. Seeing such a scene, Dustless could not help but feel nervous. After thinking for a while, he decided to help Kurosaki Ichigo. This kid was too important now, and he could not die. Dustless's pupils spun rapidly, and he suppressed his pupil power to the minimum, and focused on the falling void flash. Mahabharata. An undetectable repulsive force spread out, and the void flash was blown away. Its trajectory was suddenly changed, and it smashed towards the other side of the street. Coincidentally, a good-looking middle-aged woman was carrying vegetables home. What's going on? Kurosaki Ichigo was shocked, and he instinctively looked at the direction where the void flash fell. After seeing the middle-aged woman, his face changed, and he used all his strength to shout, "Go away, Mom!" Dustless was stunned by Kurosaki Ichigo's deafening voice. "Mom!" Dustless opened his eyes wide, and while everyone's attention was on the void flash, he floated in the air and saw a female figure in the direction of the void flash. Kurosaki Manori was taken away by Dustless, and now this Quincy's mother's surname was also Kurosaki. Boom boom boom. The falling void flash mercilessly hit Kurosaki Ichigo's mother, taking her life. Her whole body turned into a charred corpse in the middle of the street. Her heart had completely stopped, and she was burned beyond recognition by the void flash. It's really an accident this time. When I came, there was no one there. Dustless was speechless, and he was sweating profusely. Such a huge mistake was beyond his expectations. Who would have thought that such an accident would happen for a small matter? He subconsciously looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, and his face changed. Chapter 1135. Shinozaki Ichigo's face was distorted, and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked around and found the Zanpakuto in Rukia's hand. He directly snatched it away and then pounced on Jillian fiercely. "You're brave, but you're still too weak," Dustless said lightly. Jillian wasn't worth mentioning, but to Shinozaki Ichigo, he was a monster. "This guy can see me, and he snatched my Zanpakuto?" Rukia's sweat-stained little face was full of sluggishness. She was so shocked that she couldn't speak clearly. She subconsciously touched her hands, but her hands were empty. She stared blankly at Shinozaki Ichigo, who was hysterically slashing towards Mainaka. "Human, come back!" Rukia shouted loudly, and at the same time, she used Shuinpa and instantly appeared in front of Shinozaki Ichigo. "Give me back my Zanpakuto." Rukia's face was filled with anger. This human is so bold. She, a Shinigami, was robbed of her Zanpakuto by a mere human. It's simply a shame. "Get out of my way!" Shinozaki Ichigo gasped and shouted with red eyes. "She killed my mother, I want revenge!" "Stupid!" Rukia was stunned when she heard this, and she scolded with a straight face. "If I were you, I would go and save her, maybe there's still a chance of survival." Although she said that, Rukia was sure that Shinozaki Ichigo's mother was dead. It must be Jillian's faint, and there was no chance of survival. She said that in hopes that Shinozaki Ichigo would give up his obsession. After all, Jillian was far from what a human could compete with. Bang! Shinozaki Ichigo quickly dropped his Zanpakuto and ran to his mother's side. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. At this moment, his mother's body had turned into a pile of charcoal. "I didn't do it on purpose. I was saving you, otherwise, you would be the one who died." Dustless looked calm, and at the same time, he comforted himself. "This guy is really something. He actually threw my Zanpakuto on the ground." "Forget it, it doesn't suit your taste." Pouting her small mouth, she glared at Kurosaki Ichigo with dissatisfaction. When Rukia turned around, a violent wind suddenly came, and she was caught off guard and was blown away. Bang! Rukia's petite body was smashed against the wall. Her face was as pale as snow. She looked at the approaching Jillian and wanted to stand up, but her terrible physical condition made her unable to move. "Ao ao ao!" The heart-wrenching roar came again, and Shinozaki Ichigo's body suddenly shivered, and he ran to Rukia's side and picked up the cold Zanpakuto again. Holding the knife, his mind was filled with only one voice. Chop the monster in front of him into pieces. "Not bad." Rukia gave a rare compliment, and then sighed heavily. "I'm deeply sympathetic to your mother's plight, but I have to remind you that humans are still humans. They can't fight against the greater void, especially this kind of Jillian. I don't care. I have to kill him and avenge my mother. I don't care even if I have to sacrifice my life." Shinozaki Ichigo roared hoarsely and his body was trembling. "He actually has the resolve to perish together with us." Hearing this, Rukia's gem-like eyes flashed. She felt the constantly collapsing ground, and looking at the source, the unconscious Jillian was close at hand. "If you want to kill him, it's actually possible, but I'll lend you the power of the Shinigami to fight against him. It's finally finished. There are still so many variables." In the distance, Dustless, who heard this, breathed a sigh of relief. When he turned around and was about to leave leisurely, the footsteps of an uninvited guest immediately floated in front of him. "So it's you." Seeing this, Dustless grinned and said lightly, "It seems that you saw it just now. I won't explain. If I said that I didn't do it on purpose, would you believe me?" The person who came was a middle-aged uncle with a face full of stubble. At first glance, he didn't look very handsome, but the more you look at him, the more interesting and charming he became. This person was the former captain of the 10th Division, now called Shinozaki Ichigo. "If I trusted you, I wouldn't have brought him here." Shinozaki Ichigo's face was expressionless as he waved the tachi in his hand. His actions explained everything. That's true. I've wasted my breath. Dustless stopped talking and pointed at Shinozaki Ichigo's situation. If I were you, I'd go and save my son first. Otherwise, if he dies, your Shiba family will have no descendants. But I'll help you adopt your 2 daughters. Dustless's lips curled up high. It was hard not to think that he was as cunning as a fox. You're looking for death. Hearing this, Shinozaki Ichigo's killing intent rose. His family was his reverse scale, and Dustless took away his wife's life just like that. Now, he wasn't even going to let go of his daughters. How could he remain calm? How could he swallow this insult? Whoosh! A cold light came towards him. Shinozaki Ichigo's speed was unimaginably fast. How surprising. You're still so fast even after losing the power of the Shinigami. Your battle consciousness hasn't been destroyed. Dustless's eyes rippled as he spoke calmly. In an instant, Shinozaki Ishin, who was holding the hilt of his sword with both hands, pounced forward. His arms exerted force, and the moment the white light came down, Wuchen grabbed the sword god and threw Shinozaki Ishin away. Crack! 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 Many cracks appeared on the wall. Shinozaki Ichigo's expression was ugly as he sank into the cracks. He looked at Dustless with determination. This is spiritual pressure? You should have lost the power of the Shinigami. Frowning, Dustless locked his gaze on Shinozaki Ichigo. After sensing carefully for a moment, he quickly realized that something was wrong. This didn't belong to the Shinigami. Chapter 1136. In the past, Shinozaki Ishin fought Dustless with all his might and lost all his power. He still hadn't recovered, and this violent murderous spiritual pressure was completely different from the death gods. You're really unscrupulous in order to take revenge. Dustless smiled as he looked at Shinozaki Ishin, who was surrounded by a red light. This dense murderous intent was extremely scary, and those who didn't have a strong will would start hallucinating. Dustless stared at Ishin, who was being swallowed by the bone mask, and said meaningfully, "You've released the power of the greater void in your body. This is a big problem. Although you can still fight, you should know the consequences. Without the suppression of the death god's power, you'll become a greater void in no time." Roar! Shinozaki Ishin let out a sharp roar. At this moment, his face was completely unrecognizable. His eyes were bloodshot, and his body was filled with murderous intent. So what? As long as I can die with you, I don't care. Shinozaki Ishin gritted his teeth and said word by word. His hatred for Dustless was as deep as the ocean. If it weren't for him, he wouldn't have lost the power of the death god. If it weren't for him, his wife and family wouldn't be in danger. The main culprit of everything was Dustless. Bring it on. Seeing that Shinozaki Ishin was determined to fight him, Dustless didn't want to waste time talking. He hooked his finger at Shinozaki Ishin, and his expression was full of provocation. Shoo shoo shoo. Seeing this, Shinozaki Ishin's expression turned serious. His feet collapsed on the ground, and a shocking crack appeared. Boom boom boom. There was a sudden gust of wind from the left. Wu Chen turned his head and saw a claw that was sharper than a knife coming at his head. It was a ruthless attack. Dustless didn't dodge. His body emitted a warm glow that was as dazzling as the sun. The claws that came in contact with Dustless's body instantly lost their effect. Not effective? Shinozaki Ishin, who was being swallowed by the greater void's violent spiritual pressure, couldn't help but pause. You want to kill me? No problem. But this place is not suitable for fighting. You don't want your son and daughter to get involved in our fight, do you? Dustless casually waved his hand, and a crescent-shaped long and narrow button appeared in the void. He leaped into it. Humph, even if it's the 18th level of hell, I'll accompany you once. Witnessing the bottomless abyss, Shinozaki Ishin followed Dustless into it. The grudge between them ran deep, and now that Dustless had indirectly caused the death of his wife, Shinozaki Ishin was enraged, whether it was intentional or not. I would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. The mysterious dark space was very narrow. In just a few breaths of time, Shinozaki had tracked down a strange yet familiar world. Wind and sand filled the sky. There was no sunlight, and not even a blade of grass grew. Dazzling withered bones were hidden in the wind and sand. This is... After looking around, Shinozaki Ishin's surging killing intent stopped for a moment. He said in a low voice, "This looks like Hueco Mundo." "That's right. This is Hueco Mundo, and also the place where you died. Although it's not a beautiful place, it's still a field of withered bones. You won't have to worry about being lonely when you step into the underworld. At least you'll have someone to accompany you on the road to the underworld." Dustless chuckled. His body was like a gust of wind, floating in the sky. The wind and waves that came from all directions circled around Dustless's body. It was extremely mysterious. "Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me." Shinozaki Ishin's face darkened. The spiritual pressure of the great void in his body once again played the prelude to destruction. In the blink of an eye, a huge red energy ball was formed. After he was bitten by White Void, it's not surprising that he was affected by the power of the great void. However, it's surprising that he can control the power of the void so skillfully. Whether it's the reverberation spin, just now, or the void flash, now, they've all reached the point of perfection. A Grim Reaper who lost the power of the Grim Reaper has mastered the power of the void to the peak. How ironic! Dustless muttered in his heart. At the same time, a translucent wall slowly formed. Binding path number 81. Sky shattering. The red light illuminated the entire world. The huge energy ball continued to expand. When the spiritual droplets floating in the void could not withstand the violent void flash and evaporated, Shinozaki Ishin used all his strength to throw out the terrifying void flash. Swish, swish, swish. The void flash disappeared in an instant. Dustless, who had excellent eyesight, could see everything clearly. This was the first time he had seen such an exaggerated void flash. It turned the entire sky red, giving people the illusion that a huge piece of the sky was pressing down on them. Ka ka ka. The destructive power shattered the translucent barrier as if it did not exist. It shattered with a single poke and directly pounced on Dustless's face. Boom boom boom. The red flame tube exploded with a bang. The sky within a radius of 10 miles shook violently. The entire world seemed to be shaking. It was very frightening. After the explosion, the invisible shockwave was even more powerful. It swept away all the life forms in the Hueco Mundo. The weak great voids were directly shattered into pieces. Where is he? Shinozaki Ishin expanded his spiritual pressure and found Dustless's spiritual pressure. Dustless walked out of the flame and scathed and teased. "Ah! That was really dangerous just now. If it weren't for the fact that I have countless abilities, I might have been torn to pieces by you." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The void trembled, and Shinozaki Ishin disappeared without a trace. "Then I'll have to ask you to die now." The void behind Dustless rippled. Shinozaki Ishin, who was holding a sharp ancient sword, flashed and slashed at his head with all his strength. "You can kill me if you want, but at least look up." Dustless pointed at the sky and smiled mysteriously. Shinozaki Ishin was stunned. He instinctively looked at the sky. His eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. What the hell is that? Why are there so many of them? Chapter 1137. Shinozaki Ishin stared blankly at the mysterious redwood falling from the sky. He couldn't help but stare blankly. The huge amount of wood and the area they covered made his heart skip a beat. Even his hatred for Dustless had lessened because of these things that appeared out of nowhere. There are so many pieces of wood, and they cover the entire sky. How did this guy get them? Shinozaki Ishin's eyes widened. He was so shocked that he even forgot about Dustless in front of him. Suddenly, he smelled the scent of death and shuddered. His gaze immediately returned to Dustless. He thought to himself, "No matter what, he is the one who cast the spell. As long as I kill this guy, the danger before me will naturally be resolved." Shinozaki Ishin's brain cells spun rapidly. He immediately made up his mind. He drew out a huge amount of spiritual pressure from his body. It was as vast as the ocean. His special white broadsword glowed with a blood-red glow. "You want to take this opportunity to kill me?" Dustless, who knew Shinozaki Ishin's intention, was both angry and amused. Shinozaki Ishin was delusional enough to think that he could turn the tables in such a short time. His brain must have been fried by the flames of revenge. He immediately formed a seal with both hands. The falling red wood became even faster. He shouted, "Immortal spell, bright god gate." Swish! Swish! The thousands of redwood circles seemed to have become tens of thousands of times heavier. Their speed increased by a few times in an instant. Under Dustless's control, they all flew towards Shinozaki Ishin mercilessly. At the same time, Shinozaki Ishin's white broadsword had obviously reached its limit. A blood-red glow could be seen clearly. It gathered and did not dissipate. The red glow was soul-stirring and sharp. Shinozaki Ishin glared at Dustless ferociously. He recalled the hatred he had for all these years. He swung the blood-red glow in his hand and shouted, "Die!" Swish! Swish! The red slash was coming towards Shinozaki Ishin with boundless power. The color was as demonic and frightening as human blood. Dustless sized up the incoming slash expressionlessly. He floated in the sky quietly as if nothing existed. His pitch-black eyes were very calm. Just as the slash was about to swallow Dustless, the redwood circles arrived as expected. Bang bang bang! In the nick of time, the red divine wood destroyed it. Wave after wave of attacks directly smashed the slash into pieces. What was most shocking was that the red wood was like an invisible mouth. The slash didn't even explode, and the spiritual pressure was absorbed by it while it was still alive. This, gulp. Even with Shinozaki's strong mentality, he could not help but sob. Shock replaced the weathered look on his face. This thing can absorb my spiritual pressure? Shinozaki growled absent-mindedly. His words were filled with astonishment. Looking at his dazed expression, it was as if his worldview had collapsed, and his thoughts were in a mess. "You should thank me for taking a fancy to your son." After a long time, ripples spread out in the boundless sky. Dustless's voice gathered beside Shinozaki Ishin's ears and lingered for a long time. After all, he is the most outstanding test subject. His future achievements will far surpass yours. Dustless was very confident, with an expression that said, "You should thank me." Roar, roar, roar. The unique roar of the great void erupted again. Shinozaki Ishin's eyes gradually lost the wisdom that a human should have, replaced by endless killing intent and hatred, as well as many negative emotions. Shinozaki Ishin knew that he did not have much time left. If he did not take care of Dustless quickly, he would fall into the void and completely lose his humanity. Void flash. The red flash swept across, carrying with it Shinozaki Ishin's anger and hatred. The scene was spectacular, and the thick beam of light almost covered the entire sky. "You reckless thing. I wanted to let you live a little longer, but you're so untactful. Since you want to die so badly, I'll send you to the netherworld immediately to reunite with your wife." With a cold expression, Dustless's body floated with light and dove toward the incoming beam of light. Has this guy gone mad? Seeing this, Shinozaki Ishin was shocked. Facing Void Flash, Dustless did not dodge. Instead, he charged toward Void Flash head-on. He was simply courting death. However, in the next second, Shinozaki Ishin understood the reason. The moment he came into close contact with Void Flash, Dustless's entire body turned into light. His entire body shone with a bright light, and Void Flash could not attack him at all. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Shinozaki Ishin. His empty right hand glowed, and the outline of a shining sword vaguely appeared. He shouted, "Sky Sword of Clouds." Dustless was like the sun in the sky. His expression was cold. Then, under Shinozaki Ishin's shocked gaze, the golden light slashed down. Pucci! Shinozaki Ishin's entire body was split in half by Dustless. His method was extremely cruel. His purplish-red blood dyed the ground of the void circle red. Seeing this, Dustless did not give up. A pink circular flame flew out of his right hand. Path of Destruction 54. Flame Destruction. The circular flame flew out and locked onto Shinozaki Ishin, who was split in half on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The ground was set ablaze, and a huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. Shinozaki Ishin, who was split in half, disappeared with the wind. Not even his body was left behind. Idiot! You were no match for me before. Now that you've lost your Shinigami's power, how can you be my match? It seems that hatred has indeed burned your brain, Shiba Ishin. Dustless glanced at the shadow that disappeared with the wind. His expression returned to its usual coldness. Chapter 1138. Dustless opened the door to the modern world and stepped into it. Just as he was about to leave Hueco Mundo, he felt a gust of wind behind him, followed by a sharp pain in his heart. Poochie! The ice-cold long saber minced Dustless's internal organs, ending his life in an instant. He turned his head around and saw Shinozaki Ishin in perfect condition. You bastard! You should be dead already. Dustless clenched his teeth and stared at Shinozaki Ishin with bloodshot eyes. And this is... He opened his eyes wide and looked at the katana in his chest. It was obviously not the katana that belonged to Voids. It was a Zanpakuto from head to toe. Impossible, you should have lost the power of the Shinigami. How can you still have a Zanpakuto? Dustless exclaimed. His tone had lost its usual calmness. Hehe. God's plan is better than man's. I did lose the power of the Shinigami to escape from you. But I also regained another power. Shinozaki Ishin smiled and said, I did lose all my power at that time, but because of the void, I regained my power. The power of the Shinigami and the void have both returned. The void? Hearing this, Wu Chen's face sank. His eyes flickered as he said, You mean the void created by Aizen Muzu? The one created with the soul of the Shinigami as the foundation? So it was void white. Dustless understood how Shinozaki Ishin regained the power of the Shinigami. Because Void White was able to use the power of the Shinigami, Shinozaki Ishin, who fused with Void White, naturally obtained the power of the Shinigami and the Shinigami. I underestimated you. You purposely hid the power of the Shinigami just to bait me? Dustless suddenly understood Shinozaki Ishin's intention. He cursed himself for being careless. That's right. Shinozaki Ishin nodded and said, I fought with you before, so I know how scary you are. That's why I had to find another way to deal with you. So you were faking everything just now? Dustless asked in a hoarse voice. There's nothing I can do about it. The reason is that you're too terrifying. Shinozaki Ishin sneered, and the spiritual pressure that belonged to the Grim Reaper in his body surged again. Thanks to you, I've obtained the power of the Grim Reaper and the Void, which is commonly known as the Mask. I've also been fortunate enough to obtain the ability of enhanced regeneration. I underestimated you. Lowering his head, Wu Chen confessed to this without hiding anything. Of course. Don't think that you can kill a former captain so easily. Shinozaki Ishin's spiritual pressure rose rapidly, and his entire body was filled with a scorching aura. He roared, Don't think that this is the end. Buzz buzz buzz. As soon as Shinozaki Ishin finished speaking, the ground began to tremble, and a giant blade-shaped flame appeared on the ground. 96 of the Tao of Destruction. 1 blade cremation. The gigantic blade-shaped flame pulverized the soft sand. An unprecedentedly gigantic blade of light instantly rose from the ground. Sensing the terrifying temperature that could even melt the sky, Shinozaki decisively pulled out his blade and retreated. Boom boom boom. The flaming blade exploded, evaporating the remaining spiritual droplets in the air. An incomparably thick pillar of fire rose from the ground into the air. It was a shocking distance of a few hundred meters. This should be the end. Seeing this, Shinozaki Ishin heaved a sigh of relief. Sensing the disappearance of Dustless's spiritual pressure, he smiled in relief. His long-cherished wish of many years had been fulfilled. The shackles that bound his body also disappeared, and his body felt exceptionally light. What is that? A blinding golden light suddenly swept across the sky, so bright that Shinozaki Ishin could not open his eyes. Within the flames, a gigantic figure appeared. The golden figure was as majestic as a mountain peak, reaching straight into the clouds. It was covered in heavy armor that looked ancient. The 2 golden katanas on its waist were dozens of meters long, and it sent chills down one's spine. Especially the ferocious Tengu armor. It made one shudder in fear. What the hell is this? Shinozaki Ishin muttered to himself in disbelief. He tensed up, and he could acutely sense a murderous aura locking onto him. The boiling murderous aura made him feel as if he had fallen into hell. It is impressive that you are so smart. A cold and magnetic voice came from the top of the monster's head. Shinozaki raised his head and looked over. What he saw was Dustless. His expression was cold, and his shining eyes were filled with admiration. He seemed to admire Shinozaki Ishin's intelligence. It was not easy to achieve this. How is this possible? I should have crushed his internal organs. How is he still alive? And he is completely fine. Shinozaki Ishin's face was extremely pale, and his hands that were holding the Zanpakuto were trembling. Clang! A loud explosion attracted Ishin's attention. Ken Susanoo perfect form pulled out the blade of his katana, and a golden light swept out from the tip of the katana. Shoo shoo shoo! The chilling wind from the katana killed Shinozaki Ishin, and it covered the sky and shattered the earth. A crack that was dozens of kilometers long appeared on the land of Hueco Mundo. Shinozaki Ishin was chopped into pieces, and there was nothing left of him. Why aren't you using super regeneration now? Idiot! Dispelling Ken Susanoo, Dustless sneered. The chilling wind from the katana still had some characteristics, and it was impossible for Shinozaki Ishin to continue creating something out of nothing. Crack crack. Dustless opened his mouth again, and just as he was about to leave, the sky distorted, and an unexpected figure appeared. It's you, what's the matter? Dustless asked coldly, and his face was filled with confusion. After living in the modern world for a few years, he had a lot of interactions with the person in front of him, and they were in a relationship where they used each other. Chapter 1139. This person was Dustless's future ally, Urahara Kisuk. It's you? Urahara Kisuk looked at Wuchin with doubt in his surprised tone. He immediately looked at the exaggerated crack on the ground, and his eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Who did this? Urahara Kisuk was like being struck by lightning. His mind was in chaos. The crack in the ground that was attacked by Ken Susanoo seemed to split the entire Hueco Mundo into two. It was extremely shocking. It was the first time in Urahara Kisuk's life to see such a dreamy scene. Looking at the torn Hueco Mundo below, it was as terrifying as a natural disaster. Dustless said calmly, I happened to encounter a Overlord before, so I killed him. Hearing this, Urahara Kisuk's expression suddenly froze. What did he mean by killing him? He couldn't help but feel sorry for Overlord who was just killed by Dustless. It gave people the feeling that he had casually killed Jillian. What's the matter? Seeing Urahara Kisuk motionless, Dustless asked, If there's nothing else, I'll go first. Urahara Kisuk couldn't help but look up at Dustless, licked his dry tongue, looked at his back and asked, Are we still allies in the same boat? Of course. Dustless replied directly without thinking. Now, and in the future, we only have one enemy at present, Aizen Sosuke. Waving his hand to open Hueco Mundo, Dustless stepped into it and merged with the darkness. Then the broken black space began to heal. In the cold and desolate void, only Urahara Kisuk was left alone, silent. Ka ka ka. After a while, a dazzling white light swept past Urahara Kisuk, showing the outline of a crossing gate, and then a wheat-colored young woman stepped out of it. Her figure was curvaceous and very hot. Miss Yaichi. Urahara Kisuk was stunned for a moment before he said, Is the group of people from the Masked Legion okay? Fortunately, they escaped quickly in the last battle of Soul Society. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. His condition is not bad. Saifeng's courtyard Yi nodded and gave Urahara Kisuk a comforting look, indicating that he didn't need to worry. Immediately, his face inevitably became gloomy, and his wrinkled little face lost its former brilliance. He looked very decadent and worried. But then again, is it really reliable to cooperate with that guy? Why do I feel like they're colluding with each other? Dustless's back appeared in his mind. Those deep eyes could devour people's minds, making it impossible for people to understand what he was thinking. To be honest, I have the same feeling. Urahara Kisuk shrugged and sighed heavily. Not only are they colluding with each other, they are clearly leading the wolf into the house. If we don't control it well, we'll be swallowed alive sooner or later. After hearing Ye's question, Urahara Kisuk said, But even if we're walking on a tightrope on the cliff, we can only brace ourselves. If we go against that guy, we'll be annihilated in an instant. After that, Urahara Kisuk looked down at the Hueco Mundo destroyed by Kansusanu perfect form and didn't speak for a long time. We can only take one step at a time. I hope we're right. Saifeng's courtyard Yi was also very melancholy. They wanted to resist Dustless, but their confidence was shattered by the tens of kilometers long crack on the ground. If they resist Aizen Sosuke, even if they're not his opponent, they still have a way to retreat. But if they resist Dustless, they'll be annihilated on the spot. They have no choice but to follow Dustless to the end. But at least we're safe for the time being. As that guy said, our current enemy is the same, and that's Aizen Sosuke. After a while, Urahara Kisuk breathed a sigh of relief. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is also a blessing in disguise. Looks like it's done. In the modern world, Dustless wandered around the vicinity of Shinozaki Ichigo's house, searching for traces of the Great Void. The spiritual pressure of Jillian that he released previously had already disappeared with the wind, and there was still a lot of dust on the ground. Ah! How cruel! He actually cut Jillian into 8 pieces. Dustless's sharp eyes immediately understood that this was Kurosaki Ichigo's doing. His gaze fell on the head of the boy in the rain. The rain from the sky drenched Kurosaki Ichigo's clothes. At this moment, he was expressionless, and the whole world was looking at him coldly. He was very disappointed. Shinozaki Ichigo was wearing the Death Tyrant suit and stood alone in the world of rain. There were still bloodstains on his Zanpakuto. Seeing this, Dustless's cold heart remained unmoved. Perhaps he had become immune after doing so many bad things, and human emotions were gradually drifting away from him. Next, it's your turn, Rukia. Taking a deep look at Rukia, who fainted due to excessive fatigue, Dustless turned around and left. The next step is to continue to persuade Aizen Sosuke to send people to capture Rukia, and then take the opportunity to lure Shinozaki Ichigo into Soul Society. Returning to the villa he robbed, Dustless first took a bath, then went to bed and slept. Soon, he would take the opportunity to sneak into Soul Society and take advantage of the chaos caused by Kurosaki Ichigo's invasion of Soul Society. He would use the star badge he stole from Jugram to sneak into the first team and steal the bankai of the captain. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.